Chapter 26. Chu Jingyi's lips inexplicably twitched as he thought of this. This must be my misconception, right? However, just as he was thinking this, he heard Chu Yuqing's mocking voice ring out at this moment. So that's how it is. Chu Lingfeng, so that's how you feel about this Luo Shaoqi. No wonder he called Luo Shaoqi master before. So he and Luo Shaoqi had this kind of relationship. Chu Lingfeng, that idiot, was actually gay. Not only that, the one who broke was a fickle man. Chu Yuqing looked with disdain at Chu Lingfeng and Yi Qianxian, who were holding on to Luo Qingtong. He no longer had any doubts as to why Luo Qingtong had suddenly run over to save Chu Lingfeng. He even automatically replaced the master that Luo Qingtong had called out when she came to save Chu Lingfeng. It must be known that these two words, to a certain extent, had the same meaning. But in another situation, the meaning of the word master could be interpreted in a much more complex way. Chu Yuqing had already regarded Luo Qingtong as Chu Lingfeng's boy toy. But now, it seemed that Chu Lingfeng, that idiot, had not only taken a fancy to a man, but had even thrown away his status as the young master of the Tianfeng Chu family for that man. He had actually called the other party master. What a disgrace to the Tianfeng Chu family. It had to be said that if this had been done by any other member of the Tianfeng Chu family, Chu Yuqing wouldn't have made such a connection. But who told this person to be Chu Lingfeng? When he thought of the other party's idiotic and gullible personality, Chu Yuqing didn't doubt his own thoughts at all. It turned out that Luo Shaoqi and Chu Lingfeng had such a relationship. No wonder Luo Shaoqi suddenly came to save Chu Lingfeng, and the latter's attitude towards her was also so tight. Chu Yuqing had previously suspected the identities of Chu Lingfeng and Luo Qingtong. However, the way Chu Lingfeng addressed him as master was too inconceivable. Even though Chu Yuqing suspected that Chu Lingfeng had truly recognized Luo Qingtong as his master, when he thought of Luo Qingtong's strength, which hadn't even reached the venerable realm, and that she was a youth, he began to wonder if his suspicions were correct. When he saw Chu Lingfeng and Yi Qianxian fighting over Luo Qingtong, he suddenly realized that he had guessed the relationship between Luo Qingtong and Chu Lingfeng. When Luo Qingtong heard his realization, she felt as if she had been struck by lightning. Such a powerful imagination actually left her speechless. If she didn't have Sherlock Holmes's life, could she not have contracted his illness? The truth was simply worlds apart from his conjecture. Luo Qingtong was speechless, but she also rejoiced at Chu Yuqing's imagination. At the very least, being misunderstood by others as having a homosexual relationship with Chu Lingfeng was better than being recognized by Yi Qianxian, right? She didn't know why Chu Lingfeng, that blockhead, was so insistent on her going over to his side. But Chu Yuqing's explanation was better than having Luo Qingtong's identity exposed by Yi Qianxian. Chu Lingfeng's eyes were cold, and he completely ignored Chu Yuqing. His pair of beastly red eyes stared fixedly at Yi Qianxian and said, "Let go. My master isn't someone you can touch." Just as he was about to speak, he remembered Luo Qingtong's previous instructions. He immediately swallowed the rest of his words and changed them to Chapter 26-27. Oh my God! Luo Qingtong covered her face with her hands. She really couldn't bear to watch. Fortunately, Chu Yuqing had already found an excellent excuse for her. Otherwise, with Chu Lingfeng's provocative actions, her identity would definitely be exposed. Was this guy here specifically to subdue her? She had told him not to call her master in front of outsiders. He hadn't called her that. But this intimate gesture, this ambiguous way of speaking, what was the difference between that and calling her master? It was simply a pain in the ass. Luo Qingtong felt that she had really been miserably tricked by Chu Lingfeng, this big blockhead. She didn't know whether to call this guy obedient or loyal. Whether it was letting her go over to his side, or letting Yi Qianxian let go, Chu Lingfeng was doing it for her own good. Luo Qingtong's lips twitched. She couldn't blame Chu Lingfeng. When Yi Qianxian heard Chu Lingfeng's words, he immediately laughed. Behind his white jade mask, a brilliant light shone in all directions. That extremely handsome face was now full of smiles, but it was because of anger. Your people. Yi Qianxian sneered at Chu Lingfeng. If he didn't know that this big blockhead was Luo Qingtong's person, and that his loyalty to her was unquestionable, without the slightest bit of impurity, he would have already killed him. Just based on Chu Lingfeng's words alone, he would have made him bleed on the spot. When had his woman become someone else's person? Did this woman make him say this? Yi Qianxian's eyes looked dangerously at Luo Qingtong. The corners of the latter's lips twitched. Seeing that Chu Lingfeng and Yi Qianxian were getting more and more hostile, and that a fight might break out in the next moment, she hurriedly said to Yi Qianxian, "Cough, brother, I'm sorry. I'll go over first to inform young Master Chu." After saying this, she explained to Yi Qianxian in a low voice, "You should be able to see that young Master Chu's temperament is different from that of ordinary people. He wants me to go over now, probably to repay me for saving his life. He wants to protect me well. Brother, you shouldn't argue with him, so as to avoid delaying the fight for the heavenly grass." Luo Qingtong's words were very reasonable. She even explained Chu Lingfeng's excessive closeness and protectiveness to her perfectly. This cunning woman. Yi Qianxian snorted coldly. Although he didn't want to let go of Luo Qingtong, he didn't want to expose Luo Qingtong. However, he wasn't prepared to expose Luo Qingtong's identity yet, so he had no reason to keep her here. After all, although he considered himself as Luo Qingtong's protector, Luo Qingtong had requested to go over to Chu Lingfeng's side. He couldn't stop her. Thinking of this, he immediately let go of Luo Qingtong's waist. Chu Lingfeng's eyes were bloodshot. He couldn't control the bestial nature in his body and wanted to make a move. Or was it because Luo Qingtong was by Yi Qianxian's side? He was afraid of hurting Luo Qingtong, so he deliberately suppressed the violence in his body. Otherwise, according to his reckless temper, he would definitely beat her up first. Let's not talk about anything else. Let's snatch Master first. The man in front of her was too rude. He actually dared to make a move on her master. He even hugged Master's waist. How could this be? Even if Master was a man, it still wasn't allowed. Chu Lingfeng pulled Luo Qingtong to his side. He looked at Yi Qianxian with a face full of vigilance and hostility. It was as if he had done something unpardonable. Luo Qingtong found it funny. She lowered her voice and asked, "What's the matter? Do you have a grudge against him? Otherwise, why would he insist on taking her over?" Chapter 26-28. Luo Qingtong knew that Chu Lingfeng didn't know about Yi Qianxian's current identity. In order to prevent him from exposing himself, Luo Qingtong didn't tell him. "Moss. Shao Qi, don't go near him." Chu Lingfeng looked at Luo Qingtong gloomily and said, "The person who likes you won't be happy. Don't abandon me after having sex with me." Chu Lingfeng, the blockhead, wanted to say, "Ming Zun won't be happy. Master, don't abandon me after having sex with me." But there were so many people around, and Luo Qingtong didn't allow him to reveal her identity. After thinking for a while, he forced himself to say this. However, he didn't expect that his words, coupled with his declaration to Yi Qianxian, would be so ambiguous. At this moment, even if Chu Lingfeng told everyone that he didn't have any feelings for Luo Qingtong, no one would believe him. The expressions of the Tianfeng Chu clan members were very interesting. As for Gui Feng and the other mercenaries, they were all dumbfounded. Damn! The young master of the Tianfeng Chu clan really did have such feelings for Luo Shaoqi. Everyone had originally thought that Chu Yuqing was spouting nonsense, but Chu Lingfeng's words proved that he was telling the truth. Chu Lingfeng's feelings for Luo Shaoqi were really impure. As for Chu Jingyi and Chu Xiaofeng, they were even more shocked. Wait a minute, the young master is a homosexual. The corners of Chu Jingyi's lips twitched. He didn't know what to say. Chu Lingfeng was the only direct descendant of the Tianfeng Chu clan. If he was a homosexual, the elders of the clan would probably explode. Even the head of the clan wouldn't ignore it. Chu Xiaofeng stared at Luo Qingtong and Chu Lingfeng in bewilderment. Oh my god, this is too explosive. How could Luo Shaoqi and young master have such a relationship? While everyone was shocked and dumbfounded, Luo Qingtong was so shocked by Chu Lingfeng's words that she slipped and almost fell to the ground. Is that why you purposely brought me to your side? She was wondering why Chu Lingfeng, this big blockhead, looked like he was going all out with Yi Qianxian. It was impossible for the two of them to know each other. Chu Lingfeng didn't know Yi Qianxian's identity either. After Luo Qingtong figured out the meaning of Chu Lingfeng's words, she suddenly didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Her lips twitched and she didn't know what to say to Chu Lingfeng. Did this blockhead know that the white jade-masked man he was talking about was Yi Qianxian? He even told her not to get too close to him. Luo Qingtong's heart was angry and funny for a while. When Chu Lingfeng heard her words, he thought she was blaming him. He suddenly felt more depressed in his heart. He knew that he should listen to his master. Whoever his master wanted to be with had nothing to do with him. But since he was with Luo Qingtong, he knew that Luo Qingtong and Yi Qianxian were a couple. Ming Zun was so good to his master. He was powerful, strong, and handsome. In Chu Lingfeng's mind, only Ming Zun was so good to Luo Qingtong. Ming Zun was always the first to arrive when Luo Qingtong was in danger. Ming Zun was the only one who cared about Luo Qingtong in every way possible. He was more concerned about her than the people who followed her through life and death. He was the one they recognized as the one who was qualified to stand beside Luo Qingtong. Chu Lingfeng regarded Luo Qingtong as a belief and a god. In his mind, no one was more powerful than Luo Qingtong. Chapter 26-29. But Ming Zun was different. He was sincerely good to master and put master in his heart. Chu Lingfeng and the others only admitted that he was by Luo Qingtong's side. Seeing that Luo Qingtong blamed him for this, his heart suddenly felt very sad. Moss. Chu Lingfeng was not good with words and didn't know what to say. He was afraid that if he said too much, he would annoy master. But he also didn't want Luo Qingtong to abandon Yi Qianxian and choose someone else. No one was more suitable for master than Ming Zun. He had to protect master from Ming Zun, so that master wouldn't be deceived by someone with ulterior motives. Thinking of this, he immediately glared at Yi Qianxian and then shouted at Luo Qingtong, "I don't care. Anyway, I won't let you be with someone else." Pfft. Hearing his words, Luo Qingtong almost spat out her saliva. Damn! Chu Lingfeng, you big fool. Do you know what you are saying now? What do you mean you won't let me be with someone else? What's with this overbearing CEO's declaration? Luo Qingtong's eyes twitched fiercely and she didn't dare to look at Yi Qianxian's direction. Chu Lingfeng, this guy, was King naturally evil. From the moment he appeared, every word and sentence was like digging a hole for her to die. This guy wasn't actually her subordinate, but her enemy. Luo Qingtong was about to shed tears of sadness for herself. While her heart was tangled, on the other side, Yi Qianxian looked at her and Chu Lingfeng with an unfathomable gaze. Naturally, he had heard the conversation between the two of them. Chu Lingfeng said that the person who likes you will not be happy, and asked Luo Qingtong not to abandon him. Yi Qianxian guessed that that person should be referring to himself. After all, he knew Luo Qingtong's identity. Other than him, no one else could be worthy of Luo Qingtong's words of abandoning him. He didn't expect Chu Lingfeng, this big fool, to be so protective of him. Yi Qianqian's expression was indifferent. He didn't take the matter of Chu Lingfeng snatching Luo Qingtong away from his side so seriously. On the contrary, Luo Qingtong's expression at this moment made him feel very satisfied. This woman is used to acting. All day long, she's tricking left and right. She probably didn't expect to be tricked so miserably by her own people, right? Yi Qianxian coldly snorted in his heart. He made up his mind to pretend that he didn't know anything. He was determined not to expose Luo Qingtong's identity. Let her be tangled up like this. Let's see how she explains it to me in the future. Yi Qianxian's heart was satisfied, but his expression was indescribably leisurely and contented. Luo Qingtong didn't know that she had been seen through long ago. She was thinking about how to smooth things over with Chu Lingfeng's words. Their thoughts were different. On the other side, Chu Yuqing's heart was filled with indescribable pride. Sure enough, it was as he thought. This Chu Lingfeng had taken a fancy to Luo Shaoqi. A fool, learning how to talk about love like other people. In the end, he would only be fooled by others. But although Chu Lingfeng was a fool, the people of the Tianfeng Chu family weren't fools, right? As Chu Yuqing thought this, a sinister smile appeared on his face. He had just been thinking about how to extricate himself from this matter. After all, if Chu Lingfeng didn't die, then the unlucky one would be him. All the plans he'd made before were now useless. Chapter 26:30. Otherwise, even if they managed to kill Chu Lingfeng, they would still die. But this was different. Didn't they have Luo Shaoqi as their weakness? Luo Shaoqi had seduced the young master of the Tianfeng Chu clan, seducing him into depravity and disregarding the dignity of the Tianfeng Chu clan. As the Tianfeng Chu clan's disciples, they couldn't just sit by and watch, could they? They had to eliminate this femme fatale Luo Shaoqi. Of course, if Chu Lingfeng tried to stop them and was accidentally killed by them, it would be an accident, wouldn't it? Chu Lingfeng was extremely pleased with himself as he thought of this. He really was a genius for coming up with such an idea. In this way, not only could he perfectly get rid of Chu Lingfeng, this huge hidden danger, but he could also make Luo Shaoqi, the person who had ruined his plans, die without a burial. If it weren't for her, he would have already killed Chu Lingfeng. Now, it was just an eye for an eye. Chu Yuqing suddenly jumped out and shouted, "No, our Tianfeng Chu clan's young master can't fall in love with a man. Chu Lingfeng, this isn't just about you, it's about the entire Tianfeng Chu clan. We have the responsibility to prevent you from being seduced by other people with ulterior motives. Luo Shaoqi, you attacked our Tianfeng Chu clan's people before, and now you're seducing our Tianfeng Chu clan's young master to fall head over heels for you. I suspect that you were sent by other clans to deal with our Tianfeng Chu clan. Everyone, we can't let our young master do as he pleases. This Luo Shaoqi must be eliminated." As soon as Chu Yuqing's words came out, the surrounding Tianfeng Chu clan's disciples instantly understood. Chu Yuqing wanted to use the excuse of eliminating Luo Shaoqi to deal with Chu Lingfeng. This was especially true for Chu Hanyu and the others. When Chu Lingfeng had appeared, they had begun to distance themselves from Chu Yuqing and the others. After all, Chu Lingfeng hadn't died, and had even appeared in front of everyone. This meant that Chu Yuqing had already lost the initiative. His opponent was doomed, and they couldn't get involved with him. But when they heard Chu Yuqing's words, their faces froze. Then, their eyes began to shine brightly. That's right, he wanted to kill Luo Shaoqi to deal with Chu Lingfeng. At that time, if Chu Lingfeng tried to stop them, they would say that it was an accident that they accidentally killed Chu Lingfeng to protect the dignity of the Tianfeng Chu family. It was Chu Lingfeng who was willing to die for Luo Shaoqi. He was a romantic. What did that have to do with people like them? In this way, they would be able to kill Chu Lingfeng openly. Everyone's breathing quickened. What kind of person would collude with Chu Yuqing? Naturally, it would be someone who was ambitious and covetously eyeing Chu Lingfeng's position as young master. Someone who wanted to kill him. Normally, these people wouldn't have dared to make a move against Chu Lingfeng. But now that they had a good reason to do so, they couldn't help but be moved. This was too rare. This opportunity was too hard to come by. Furthermore, it would allow them to go all out in the open without any reservations. Their hearts immediately started thumping violently. Unknowingly, they had gathered around Chu Yuqing from all directions. Chapter 26:31. Kill Chu Lingfeng. This way, no matter who became the head of the family, the elder council under their control would not be weakened. After all, in this generation, Chu Tianyi held absolute power. In the Tianfeng Chu family, his words were absolute, and the elder council's power was weakened to the extreme. They didn't want to see themselves being oppressed by Chu Lingfeng like their parents when they were in charge of the elder hall. The other party had inherited Chu Tianyi's bloodline, and was extremely terrifying. If they could strangle him here, everyone's hearts were stirred. They would not take the initiative to attack Chu Lingfeng, but if there was a chance to kill Chu Lingfeng, they would definitely not refuse. The eyes of the Tianfeng Chu family members flashed, but the faces of Chu Lingfeng, Chu Jingyi, and the others suddenly became solemn. Not good, Chu Yuqing has designs on the young master. Chu Jingyi's eyes were cold as he swept his gaze over the faces of the Tianfeng Chu family members. His heart immediately sank. He hadn't expected Chu Yuqing to find such an excuse to make trouble. This was troublesome. However, Chu Jingyi also knew that after Chu Yuqing failed to kill Chu Lingfeng, he would not rest until the latter was dead. Even if Chu Yuqing did not use Luo Shaoqi as an excuse, he would find other ways to make trouble. This had nothing to do with Luo Shaoqi. She just happened to give Chu Yuqing a reason. The real fuse was that Chu Yuqing wanted to kill Chu Lingfeng. He would not let Chu Lingfeng leave the abandoned continent alive. Otherwise, the one who would die in the end would be him. Chu Jingyi thought so, but he did not blame Luo Qingtong. Instead, he coldly said to Chu Xiaofeng and the others, "Protect the young master well." Chu Yuqing, aren't you meddling too much? What does it have to do with you who the young master likes? Even if the family doesn't allow it, the elders will naturally make a decision after we leave the abandoned continent. It's not your place to meddle. Humph. Chu Yuqing sneered at them. The eighth elder's people were the patriarch's sworn supporters. There was no need for him to be courteous to them. In any case, they would definitely stand on Chu Lingfeng's side. At that time, he would kill them all. As Chu Yuqing thought this, his expression darkened and he smiled proudly. Chu Jingyi, what are you saying? Us top disciples have been nurtured by our families. Naturally, we have to share the burden of our families. He's just a small mercenary. Just kill him. Why do we have to alarm the elders and have them make a move? There's no need to bother them. As Chu Yuqing spoke, he chuckled darkly. Instead, it's you who are so protective of her. Could it be that you were the ones who instigated this? Did you introduce such a troublemaker to the young lord? When he said this, his face suddenly turned solemn and he shouted sternly, "I think you all have bad intentions. After we kill Luo Shaoqi, we'll hold you accountable. If you dare to stop us, we'll treat you as her accomplice and deal with you together." Chu Yuqing's words had already revealed his ferocious side. His ambition and killing intent were as clear as day. Attack, surround them. Young lord, please forgive us. Chapter 26:32. Chu Yuqing said with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. He was already prepared to make his move. Behind him, Chu Hanyu and the others all stepped forward. These people had all agreed to help Chu Yuqing find Chu Lingfeng and kill him. Now that they'd gotten such a good opportunity, and had a legitimate reason to attack, how could they endure? Immediately, he joined Chu Yuqing and the others in surrounding Chu Lingfeng, Chu Xiaofeng, Chu Jingyi and the others. Luo Qingtong had a lot of mercenaries on her side, but compared to the elite disciples' guards, they weren't enough. Although Chu Qiankong and Chu Yuanhong hadn't made a move, their people had spread out far and wide, surrounding them in all directions. It was obvious that they didn't want to give Chu Lingfeng and Luo Qingtong any chance to escape. Even if Luo Qingtong and the others managed to break through Chu Yuqing's encirclement, they still had them. At the critical moment, as long as they obstructed Luo Qingtong and Chu Lingfeng's escape route, Chu Yuqing and the others would immediately catch up to them and completely surround them. This scene looked like a hopeless situation. The situation had changed so quickly that before the mercenaries behind Luo Qingtong could react, they were already completely surrounded. They hadn't expected the situation to change so quickly. By the time they reacted, they could only tighten their grip on their weapons and stick close to Luo Qingtong and the others. Little seventh young master. Everyone's hearts were filled with nervousness and worry. Luo Qingtong's eyes narrowed slightly. She didn't have time to think about how to explain things to Yi Qianxian. Instead, she looked at Chu Yuqing's people, who were taking the opportunity to make things difficult for her. The latter wasn't stupid. They knew that they were taking advantage of this opportunity to make things difficult for Chu Lingfeng. Luo Qingtong knew that although the relationship between her and Chu Lingfeng wasn't the kind of relationship that Chu Yuqing and the others thought it was. However, she was indeed Chu Lingfeng's weakness. Chu Yuqing and the others had stumbled upon a way to deal with Chu Lingfeng. But so what? They dared to use her as a raft to deal with Chu Lingfeng. Were they not afraid of spraining their feet? Luo Qingtong's face was cold. She looked at Chu Yuqing and the others, her eyes completely devoid of emotion. She hated it when others used her. This point was only second to being betrayed. Chu Yuqing wanted to use her as a stepping stone, so he shouldn't blame her for breaking his foot. As for Bei Qing, Feng Yu and the others, they were prepared to intervene the moment Chu Yuqing and the others attacked. However, they were stopped by Yi Qianxian. No need. His voice was indifferent, deep and cold. He looked in Luo Qingtong's direction. Just by looking at this woman's current attitude, he knew that she had a way. There was no need for him to intervene. Yi Qianxian was happy to let Luo Qingtong resolve this herself. He liked to see this woman's radiant appearance very much. Although he was always gloomy about this person's craftiness and fickleness, and how she didn't like to rely on him, Yi Qianxian knew that it was precisely this type of Luo Qingtong that deeply attracted him. Whether she was crafty and fickle-minded, eccentric, arrogant, domineering, or insufferably arrogant, he liked it all. Moreover, he was happy to discover more different sides of her. Yi Qianxian's words stunned Bei Qing, Feng Yu, and the others. Master. They looked at Yi Qianxian. They didn't know if the latter was angry at Luo Qingtong and wanted to make her suffer before making a move. But there was nothing between the demonic physician and Chu Lingfeng. They could all tell that their master couldn't have been so blinded by the situation that he didn't notice anything, right? As Feng Yu thought this, she immediately opened her mouth to mediate. Chapter 26:33. Calamity. Luo Qingtong chuckled as she looked in Chu Yuqing's direction. Young Master Yuqing has already pinned such a big label on me. If I don't do something, it really seems like I'll be living up to this reputation of being a calamity. What a loss. Luo Qingtong's expression was indifferent. Her smile, which was covered by her birthmark, revealed 3 parts malevolence and 7 parts devilish charm. Speaking of which, it was strange. Luo Qingtong's appearance was so ugly that no one would be able to look directly at her. But in front of everyone, her ugly face covered with birthmarks was always overlooked. Not only that, but when she smiled, her 3 parts malevolent and 7 parts ugly appearance gave people an indescribable feeling of breathtaking grace. But Luo Qingtong's appearance was clearly extremely ugly. No one knew where this breathtaking feeling came from, but it just so happened that they had such a feeling. When Luo Qingtong's words came out, Chu Yuqing immediately sneered. In his opinion, Luo Qingtong was struggling on her deathbed. Just based on the fact that he had something on Chu Lingfeng, he could easily kill Luo Qingtong. Not only that, but even Chu Lingfeng wouldn't be able to escape this fate. Luo Qingtong had previously rescued Chu Lingfeng from his encirclement. But this time, almost all the members of the Chu clan were on his side. How could her people be compared to the guards of the Chu clan of Heavenly Wind? Chu Lingfeng's side only had Chu Jingyi, Chu Xiaofeng, and 8th Elder's people. Apart from them, there were no other reinforcements. What else could Luo Qingtong do? Solidify her reputation as a calamity. If she died, then her reputation as a calamity would be solidified. Not only that, but she would also implicate Chu Lingfeng and drag him down with her. As Chu Yuqing thought this, he suddenly felt an indescribable sense of victory. He looked at Luo Qingtong and sneered, "It seems that you know your crime very well. Then we won't be polite. If you want to stall for more time and talk nonsense, then let me tell you, don't waste your time. Because we are loyal to our families and the protection of our families. In order to persuade the young lord not to do anything stupid, we will spare no effort." That's right, Chu Yuqing's words were a warning to Luo Qingtong not to try any more tricks. Among the Tianfeng Chu clan members present, other than the 8th elder who was absolutely loyal to the clan head, the rest of them couldn't wait for Chu Lingfeng to die. Previously, he didn't have a reason. But now, he had provided these people with an open and honorable reason to not be afraid of being punished. Under these circumstances, it didn't matter how much scheming and eloquence Luo Qingtong had. Even if she could turn a dead person into a living one, it wouldn't be of any use. Compared to the benefits of killing Chu Lingfeng, even something as important as obtaining the Tianluo grass couldn't compare. Otherwise, how could these people ignore the fact that the heart of the continent was about to open after hearing his words? Luo Qingtong and Chu Lingfeng were dead meat. No one on this abandoned continent could save them. However, as soon as Chu Yuqing spoke, Luo Qingtong's words were mixed with a bit of ridicule, coldness, and contempt. Is that so? Then young Master Yuqing, you'd better watch carefully. Watch how this calamity overturns the heavens and earth and overturns the rain with a flip of my hand. Chapter 26:34. The latter and the others were watching the internal strife of the Tianfeng Chu family. They even stood far away so that it would be easier for the people of the Tianfeng Chu family to take action. Are you sure you want to just stand by and watch? Luo Qingtong put on a faint smile. Together with the huge birthmark on her face, her devilish temperament was revealed again. Her eyes were fixed on the man in the front who was surrounded by the top disciples of the Lien family of the Flying Star clan. Compared with the chaos of the Tianfeng Chu family, the people of the Lien family of the Flying Star clan were much more orderly. All the disciples of the Lien family of the Flying Star clan who had hurried over were following the man on their own accord. Those who were dressed like top disciples were clustered around him, while the others were scattered in the surroundings. They were arranged in order according to their cultivation and status. There was no noise or chaos at all. It was not hard to imagine how prestigious the man was in the Lien family of the Flying Star clan. At this moment, hearing Luo Qingtong's words, all the people of the Lien family of the Flying Star clan raised their heads and looked at Luo Qingtong. The man was no exception. Are you talking to me? His thin lips parted slightly. There was a hint of surprise in his eyes when he looked at Luo Qingtong. He probably didn't expect that Luo Qingtong would speak to the people of the Lian family of the Flying Star clan at this moment. Yes. Luo Qingtong's expression was indifferent, and she looked indescribably calm. She looked at the man with a smile and said, "Of course, if there is another person here who can be the master of the Lian family of the Flying Star clan, you can take it that I'm not talking to you." Hearing that, Lian Xingqian narrowed his eyes immediately. He looked at Luo Qingtong and observed her carefully. Then, he chuckled. "Then, what do you want to talk to me about? Or rather, what do you want me to do for you?" Lian Xingqian's words were full of interest. Not because of anything else, but because Luo Qingtong was really different from the rest. At this time, the Tianfeng Chu family wanted to kill her, and even used this opportunity to attack the young master of the Chu family. She actually spoke to him. Not only that, she seemed to be asking for help from the Lian family of the Flying Star sector. This was interesting. The Lian clan of the Flying Star planet was on the opposite side of the Tianfeng Chu clan, at least for now. Both from his perspective and from the perspective of the entire Lian family of the Flying Star sector, they all hoped that the Tianfeng Chu family would have internal strife. It would be best if the fight was as intense as possible. In that case, the Lian family of the Flying Star sector would naturally win the competition for the heavenly Luo grass. Under such circumstances, Luo Qingtong actually asked them for help. Didn't she know that they couldn't possibly help her? Before Luo Qingtong could reply to Lian Xingqian, Chu Yuqing had already burst into laughter. "Ha, Luo Xiaoqi, I think you've lost your mind. You actually asked for help from the Lian family of the Flying Star sector? Why would they interfere with the affairs of the Tianfeng Chu clan? That will only bring trouble to themselves. Moreover, the competition for the heavenly Luo grass was imminent. The Tianfeng Chu clan was only doing this because they knew that killing Chu Lingfang would bring them great benefits. Why would the Lian family of the Flying Star sector give up this great opportunity to help Chu Lingfang while the Tianfeng Chu clan was fighting among themselves?" Chapter 26:35. Qi. Hearing Chu Yuqing's words, the other members of the Tianfeng Chu clan around him also showed faint expressions of mockery. Their gazes towards Luo Qingtong were full of scorn and disdain. Seeing this scene, Chu Ku and Chu Yufei also showed smug smiles on their faces. "Sister Yufei, this Luo Xiaoqi is dead for sure this time. It's ridiculous that she actually wants the Lian family of the Flying Star clan to help her. What a joke. Does she really think she's a beauty who can bring disaster to a country? She's an ugly man. Does she really think she's so charming that the young master of the Lian family of the Flying Star clan will help her regardless of everything?" Chu Ku covered her mouth and giggled. Her smile was full of malice. Hearing this, Chu Yufei also covered her mouth and giggled. Their smiles were indescribably bright and happy. Seeing Luo Qingtong suffer and be humiliated, they felt indescribably happy. Maybe young Master Luo Xiaoqi is confident. Chu Yufei's voice was soft. She had always been gentle and kind in front of others, but this time, she couldn't help but feel happy in her heart. Her words were full of contempt. She almost directly said that Luo Qingtong was shameless and felt good about herself. Ha! Hearing this, Chu Ku couldn't help but laugh out loud. While the two of them were in a good mood, Chu Xiaofeng, Chu Jingyi, and the others were very surprised. Especially Chu Jingyi. Looking at Luo Qingtong, he immediately frowned. His little cousin had said that she wasn't an ordinary person and was very capable. Now it seemed that she was just an ordinary young man. She was actually so flustered when she encountered such a thing. Asking the Lian family of the Flying Star clan for help was no different from asking for humiliation. However, Chu Jingyi couldn't blame Luo Qingtong. After all, no one would be able to calm down in such a situation. Luo Qingtong was a young man with average strength and no reputation. She was also a mercenary with no background or experience. It was already very rare for her to think of asking the Lien family of the Flying Star clan for help. At least she wasn't scared to the point of tears and snot running down her face and begging Chu Yuqing for mercy. If that was the case, they would really lose face. It was equivalent to slapping the young master in the face. Thinking, Chu Jingyi immediately wanted to ask Luo Qingtong to stop talking to the Lien family of the Flying Star clan. After all, the other party would not provide them with any help. Instead, they would watch the show from the sidelines. However, before he could speak, Luo Qingtong's Luo's voice. "Young master, you've misunderstood." Luo Qingtong's lips were light, and her smile was charming and demonic. Luo S's family of the Flying Star clan of the Flying Star clan. On the other hand, the Lien family of the Flying Star sector should be asking for our help. As soon as she said that, everyone's faces froze. Especially the Lien family of the Flying Star clan. They all looked at Luo Qingtong with strange expressions. Was this person crazy? Were they in such a hurry to help her? And begging her to let them help her. This was the biggest joke in the world. Not to mention that she was currently in a disadvantageous position against the young master of the Chu family. She was already doomed. Even if they weren't, they wouldn't be in such a hurry to help her, much less meddle in the affairs of the Tianfeng Chu family. Chapter 26-36. By now, Lien Xingchen had retracted the hint of interest in his eyes. He frowned at Luo Qingtong. Was she trying to pester him endlessly? Did she think that a few words of provocation would make him help her deal with Chu Yuqing and the others? If that was the case, then there was no point in doing so. Lien Xingchen's expression was impassive. He'd originally thought that this extraordinary youth would say something astonishing. He'd been looking forward to it. He hadn't expected her to be so crude and scheming. As the young master of the Flying Star Lien family, Lien Xingchen had seen all sorts of schemes. Luo Qingtong's provocation was child's play for him. If you're trying to say that I'm afraid of Chu Yuqing, then you don't have to say anything else. As Lien Xingchen said this, he immediately wanted his men to retreat further to prevent Luo Qingtong and the others from dragging them into the trap of dealing with Chu Yuqing. But as soon as he raised his hand, Luo Qingtong said, "Is that so? If that's the case, then I wish the Flying Star Lien family a happy scapegoat. The crime of killing the young master of the Tianfeng Chu family is no small matter. Even if the Flying Star Lien family obtains the Tianluo grass, I'm afraid they won't be able to escape the wrath of the Tianfeng Chu family." As soon as Luo Qingtong said this, Chu Yuqing and the others' expressions changed. Even Lien Xingchen's hand froze in midair. "I don't understand what you mean." He looked at Luo Qingtong. His seemingly gentle, but actually sharp eyes focused on Luo Qingtong. Chu Lingfeng was killed by the Tianfeng Chu family. It has nothing to do with the Flying Star Lien family. Is that so? Luo Qingtong chuckled as she played with the invisible thread in her hand. She looked at Lien Xingchen and said indifferently, "Young Master Lien, do you believe me?" As she spoke, her glowing red eyes swept over Chu Yuqing and the others, whose faces had changed greatly. She laughed softly and said, "Chu Yuqing and the others killed Chu Lingfeng. Although there was a reason for it, such as me. However, young Master Chu is the only son and successor of the family head. In order to find a scapegoat, they will definitely say that they only wanted to kill me, but for some reason, young Master Chu died. Why did he die? Of course, it was the Lien family of the Flying Star sector who did it. In this way, not only will they get rid of us, but they will also shift the blame to you. Isn't this killing two birds with one stone? What do you think, young Master Lien?" So, the corners of Luo Qingtong's lips curled up slightly. She looked at Lian Xingqian and the other Lian family members behind him, whose faces had already changed. They looked at Chu Yuqing and the others warily and unkindly. She chuckled softly and said, "You can only help us. And you have to help us. Otherwise, if we die without any evidence, then young Master Lian, the Lian family of the Flying Star sector will have no chance to refute this." As Luo Qingtong spoke, the birthmark on her face became even more devilishly charming. She looked at Lian Xingqian with a smile. "Young Master Lian, do you agree with me?" Luo Qingtong's face was impassive. She wasn't afraid that Lian Xingqian wouldn't help them. In fact, the moment she opened her mouth, she was already forcing Lian Xingqian and the others to help her. Perhaps in the minds of the Tianfeng Chu family members, it had never occurred to them to shift the blame for Chu Lingfeng's death onto the Lian family. Chapter 26:37. Since she'd opened her mouth and laid out this possibility for everyone to see, Lian Xingqian had to make a choice. Gamble that the Tianfeng Chu clan wouldn't frame them, or directly intervene in this internal strife and make the possibility of being the scapegoat disappear without a trace. Which one was more time-saving and 100% safe? Did he even need to choose? Helping them was Lian Xingqian's best choice. That was all he could do. It was a joke to say that she'd begged the Lian clan. Did Chu Yuqing and the others think they could force her to use the word beg? Pfft. If not for the fact that she didn't want to reveal her identity, she wouldn't even need to borrow the Lian clan's strength. Luo Qingtong looked at Lian Xingqian indifferently. On the other side, Chu Yuqing's angry voice rang out. "Nonsense. We never planned to do that. Luo Xiaoqi, don't even think about trying to frighten us. Young Master Lian, we will never implicate the Lian clan in this matter. We can swear." Before he could finish, Luo Qingtong raised her eyebrows and smiled. "Oh, I heard that silently admitting to it is a very good method. This kind of forbearance, swallowing humiliation for the sake of the family head, is much easier than complaining before. Perhaps there won't even be a little bit of punishment." "Impressive, impressive. Young Master Yuqing, I'm impressed. You're really good at scheming." Hearing Luo Qingtong's words, Chu Yuqing was so angry that he almost spat out a mouthful of blood. "Shut up. How could this Luo Xiaoqi be so good at talking?" This was the first time in many years that Chu Yuqing felt so speechless. He couldn't even out-talk a young mercenary. He'd heard from Chu Ku and the others that Luo Xiaoqi wasn't easy to deal with. He'd snorted disdainfully before, thinking that this young man was nothing but a lowly mercenary. What was so difficult about him? Chu Ku and the others didn't have the ability, so did they think he was the same as them? Chu Yuqing was disdainful. He had always felt that Luo Qingtong had saved Chu Lingfeng because he was caught off guard, and she had taken advantage of him by surprise. Therefore, he did not put Luo Qingtong in his eyes. It was only at this moment that he realized that Chu Ku and the others were not lying in the slightest. This Luo Xiaoqi was really difficult to deal with. Moreover, he was extremely cunning. He suppressed his anger and looked at Lian Xingqian, wanting to continue explaining. However, the latter's voice had already sounded. "You're right." Lian Xingqian's gaze was deep. He looked at Luo Qingtong, knowing that he had underestimated this young mercenary. He originally thought that the other party was trying to provoke him into saving them. Who would have thought that while the other party was forcing him, he wasn't trying to provoke him at all? Furthermore, he was making it so that he couldn't refuse. Just as Luo Qingtong thought, she had already put the idea of framing the Lian family of the Flying Star sector on the table. Whether or not the Tianfeng Chu family had such an idea, Lian Xingqian had to be on guard against this last move. What use was Chu Yuqing's guarantee? Just as Luo Qingtong had said, sometimes silence was a very good way to frame someone. If he trusted Chu Yuqing, he might still be betrayed. But if he helped Luo Qingtong, he could completely nip this hidden danger in the bud. Chu Yuqing wouldn't have the slightest chance to frame him. Which was better? Did he even need to choose? This young man was really making him slap his own face. Lian Xingqian's face twitched as he thought of this. Chapter 26:38. Luo Xiaoqi is under my protection. He was clearly saying that Luo Xiaoqi would be under his protection. But in reality, he was basically telling Chu Yuqing and the others that the Lian family of the Flying Star realm was going to intervene. He could forget about killing Chu Lingfeng. If all the members of the Lian clan of the Flying Star realm joined forces, they would be far stronger than Chu Yuqing and the others combined. Not to mention Luo Qingtong, Chu Lingfeng, Chu Jingyi, and the others. Chu Yuqing and the others were at a disadvantage. With a wave of Lian Xingqian's hand, all of the Flying Star Lian family's disciples and guards scattered in all directions, surrounding Chu Yuqing and the others. Once they attacked Chu Lingfeng and the others, the Lian family of the Flying Star realm would attack them as well. When the Lian family and Chu Lingfeng joined forces, Chu Yuqing and the others would be the ones to be wiped out. Seeing this, Chu Yuqing was so angry that he almost vomited blood. The smiles on Chu Ku and Chu Yufei's faces froze. What's going on? Luo Xiaoqi just said a few words and the young master of the Lian family believed her. Is he stupid? Luo Xiaoqi was just lying to him. My big brother and the others didn't even think about framing him. Chu Ku was about to go crazy. She was about to have a great opportunity to kill Luo Xiaoqi, but after she said a few words, the young master of the Lian family of the Flying Star sector actually helped her. He helped her. Chu Ku and Chu Yufei had just been laughing at Luo Qingtong, but now, Luo Qingtong had turned the tables around beautifully. The more blood she wanted to vomit in her heart, the uglier her face became. However, Chu Yufei was very clear about the things that she didn't understand. She clenched her fists and looked in Luo Qingtong's direction with jealousy. The young man's scheming was simply too outstanding. He'd forced the Lian family to take action for something that hadn't even happened yet, all because he couldn't afford to gamble. The young master of the Lian family couldn't take the risk of being the scapegoat and allow Chu Yuqing and the others to attack Chu Lingfeng. So he helped Luo Xiaoqi. In his heart, he might have known that Luo Xiaoqi was the one who tricked him. But even if there was only a slight possibility, he could only help Luo Xiaoqi. No wonder she hadn't panicked at all, and even said that the Lian family was rushing to help her. Weren't they rushing to help her? Even if Luo Qingtong didn't want the Lian family's help, the Lian family wouldn't just stand by and watch. At least, not before they left the abandoned continent. Chu Yufei gritted her teeth as she thought of this. Luo Qingtong's move really slapped countless people's faces. Those who didn't believe that she could do all this and turn the situation around were all slapped in the face. While she was gritting her teeth, Bei Qing, Feng Yu, and the others suddenly realized what was going on. They looked at Yi Qianren who was beside them. Master, you already knew about this? Knew that the demonic physician had a way to reverse the situation? Yi Qianqian's deep gaze pierced through the holes in his white jade mask and looked in Luo Qingtong's direction. His gaze was as deep as the sea and as deep as the abyss. I didn't know. His voice was slightly hoarse. He really didn't know that Luo Qingtong would use this method to resolve the crisis. This woman was always able to give him different surprises. Chapter 26:39. Chu Xiaofeng and the others were already prepared to fight to the death. But then they heard Lian Xingqian's words. He then saw the Flying Star Lian clan members scatter and surround Chu Yuqing and the others. They immediately knew that they hadn't misheard. Luo Qingtong had really done it. She'd asked the Flying Star Lien family to help them. Not only that, she'd even begged the Flying Star Lien family for help. Chu Jingyi, Chu Xiaofeng, and the other members of the Tianfeng Chu family's 8th elders line were all stunned. This Luo Xiaoqi, Chu Jingyi sucked in a deep breath. Only then did he come back to his senses. He understood how scheming Luo Qingtong was when she said those words. Perhaps in the eyes of others, Luo Qingtong's words seemed to have been made up at the last moment. But Chu Jingyi was one of the top disciples of the 8th elders line. It was impossible that he wasn't scheming at all. Just like Chu Yufei, he quickly guessed the meaning behind Luo Qingtong's words. This Luo Xiaoqi was truly incredible. In such a short period of time, she'd actually managed to find a way out of this hopeless situation. And she'd done it so perfectly. Chu Jingyi definitely couldn't have done it himself. It wasn't that he couldn't think of Luo Qingtong's method. Perhaps he could, but it definitely wouldn't be so easy or simple. He needed time, but what they lacked the most right now was time. Chu Yuqing wouldn't give them time to slowly think of a solution. What awaited them was a fate of being strangled to death. While Chu Xiaofeng, Chu Jingyi, and the others were shocked, Chu Lingfeng didn't feel anything at all. In his opinion, Luo Qingtong's actions were completely normal. As long as his master was here, nothing would happen to him. Chu Yuqing and the others wanted to kill them. They were dreaming. He snorted coldly as he looked at Chu Yuqing and the others, his eyes already bloodshot. These people had attacked him again and again. That was one thing, but they actually dared to attack Luo Qingtong. She thought about what Chu Yuqing had just said. He wanted to kill Luo Qingtong. Chu Lingfeng felt a burst of madness in his heart. He glared murderously at Chu Yuqing and the others. Just as he was about to walk out, Luo Qingtong stopped him. No need. Luo Qingtong narrowed her eyes. Naturally, she could tell what Chu Lingfeng wanted to do. This guy wanted to avenge her by killing Chu Yuqing and the others. However, although the Lien family of the Flying Star planet had helped them, they were not on their side. Lien Xingchen wouldn't allow Chu Lingfeng to make a move against Chu Yuqing and the others. He didn't want to bear the crime of killing the Chu clan's young master, but at the same time, he wouldn't help Chu Lingfeng kill Chu Yuqing and the others. That would involve him in the Tianfeng Chu clan's internal strife. Thus, Chu Lingfeng wouldn't gain anything by making a move. Since that was the case, what was the point of making a move? If Chu Lingfeng wanted to deal with Chu Lingfeng and the others, there would be plenty of opportunities in the future. There was no need to rush now. Otherwise, why would Luo Qingtong want to use the Lien family of the Flying Star planet to deal with Chu Yuqing and the others? Wasn't it because she didn't want to completely expose her abilities and strength? The heavenly grass had yet to appear, and she still had a use for Chu Yuqing and the others. Moss, Chu Lingfeng's expression was gloomy. He looked at Luo Qingtong with an unspeakable grievance and hesitation. He couldn't understand why his master didn't want him to make a move against Chu Yuqing and the others. Chapter 2640. His heart was stifled, but he couldn't disobey Luo Qingtong's orders. He immediately retreated, his killing intent filling the air. As for Chu Yuqing and the others, the moment the Flying Star Lien clan members surrounded them, they knew that it was impossible to kill Chu Lingfeng. Not only that, but they also had to endure the other party's terrifying revenge. Thus, the moment Chu Lingfeng stepped forward, they all tensed up and prepared to flee. But before they could do anything, Chu Lingfeng retreated again. His eyes were clearly filled with killing intent and viciousness, but he just looked at them and didn't make a move. It was as if a vicious beast had been put on a special beast taming rope. It was abnormally tame and docile. Everyone was shocked. This was especially true for Chu Qiankong and the other top disciples. They knew how fierce and unreasonable Chu Lingfeng's temperament was. His personality was like two extremes. When he wasn't provoked, he was both foolish and straightforward. But once he was angered, he would immediately become as ruthless as a peerless vicious beast, vowing to tear the person who angered him to pieces. At that time, no one could control Chu Lingfeng, and no one could convince him. The top disciples had suffered many losses at his hands, so they naturally knew Chu Lingfeng's temperament. But they didn't expect him to be able to restrain his anger and not make a move. One had to know that one of them had deliberately provoked Chu Lingfeng and had almost been beaten to death. At that time, the family head and elders had come, but they couldn't do anything about the violent Chu Lingfeng. They didn't expect him to be so obedient to Luo Qingtong. Everyone's eyes almost fell out of their sockets. Only now did they realize how much influence Luo Qingtong had in Chu Lingfeng's heart. Damn it, if they'd known this would happen, they wouldn't have agreed with Chu Yuqing's words and attacked Chu Lingfeng. Chu Qiankong and the others were vexed. In fact, they didn't have to kill Chu Lingfeng. If they'd known that Luo Qingtong had such a great influence on Chu Lingfeng, why would they have taken the risk to attack? Wouldn't it have been better to find a way to befriend Luo Qingtong and control her, than use her to control Chu Lingfeng? They wouldn't have fallen to the point where they had to make an enemy of Chu Lingfeng. Fortunately, they hadn't taken the final step, and Luo Qingtong didn't seem to want to pursue the matter from just now. Could it be that she didn't want to make an enemy of the Tianfeng Chu clan? When everyone thought of this, they felt that this was probably the most likely possibility. After all, most of the members of the Chu clan who were present were with them. Chu Lingfeng wasn't afraid of them, and could even take revenge on them. But Luo Qingtong was just a small mercenary. They couldn't just ignore her, right? After all, although Chu Lingfeng was the young master of the Chu clan, it wasn't good to be infatuated with a man. And the elders of the Tianfeng Chu clan might not allow such a thing to happen. Was Luo Qingtong paving the way for her future? As everyone thought this, they suddenly understood. Chu Qiankong and the others breathed a sigh of relief. They hadn't directly participated in the attack against Luo Qingtong and the others. As long as Luo Qingtong didn't pursue the matter, and Chu Lingfeng listened to her, then this matter could be considered over. As they thought this, they immediately stepped forward and sternly shouted at Chu Yuqing and the others, "All of you, stop. You're fighting among yourselves in front of so many people, and you even attacked the young master." Chapter 26:41. As they spoke, they moved in the direction of Luo Qingtong's group and surrounded Chu Yuqing's group. *CK Your grandpa Chu Qiankong and Chu Yuanhong. Chu Yuqing had already been enraged by the Lien family's actions. When he saw Chu Qiankong and Chu Yuanhong's first and second elders turn to Luo Qingtong's group and curse him, he was so angry that his brain was about to explode. Weren't these guys just waiting for Chu Lingfeng to die? Now that they saw the Lien family's people make a move, they knew there was no chance of success, so they immediately changed sides. This bunch of bastards. Chu Yuqing cursed inwardly as he vomited blood. Fortunately, he hadn't been the only one to make a move. Chu Hanyu and the others had been involved as well. Otherwise, wouldn't Chu Qiankong and Chu Yuanhong have tied him up and brought him to Luo Xiaoqi to beg for forgiveness? Thinking of this, Chu Yuqing felt even more nauseous. He clenched his teeth and looked at Luo Qingtong. He knew that he couldn't do anything to Luo Qingtong this time, let alone Chu Lingfeng. Fortunately, that bitch Luo Xiaoqi still didn't dare to openly offend the Tianfeng Chu family. For now, he'd just admit defeat. Once it was time to fight for the heavenly grass, he'd think of a way to make a move against them. As Chu Yuqing thought of this, a sinister smile appeared on his face. He forced a smile and looked at Luo Qingtong. He said coldly, "This time, it was indeed us who didn't think things through. Young master's matter will naturally be handled by the family's elders. Since you all think we've overstepped our boundaries, we'll withdraw." After saying this, he immediately ordered his men to put away their weapons and disperse the encirclement. But as soon as he finished speaking, Luo Qingtong's indifferent voice rang out. "Young Master Yuqing, is this the end?" Luo Qingtong's expression was indifferent. She raised an eyebrow at Chu Yuqing. He didn't think she'd let him off so easily, did he? He could avoid the death penalty, but he couldn't escape punishment. Luo Qingtong wasn't prepared to let Chu Lingfeng lay his hands on Chu Yuqing and the others, but who said she was going to let Chu Yuqing off so easily? Especially when the other party looked as if he didn't dare to do anything to him. He didn't know where his confidence came from. "What else do you want?" "Humph." Chu Yuqing sneered. He was certain that Luo Qingtong was bluffing. If she dared to do anything to them, she wouldn't have stopped Chu Lingfeng from taking action just now. He still wanted to scare him now. Did he really think that he was a 3-year-old child who could be easily fooled? Reality proved that Chu Yuqing was wrong. In that case, young Master Yuqing isn't going to apologize for slandering me. This is going to be difficult. Luo Qingtong raised an eyebrow. She looked at Chu Yuqing. "Although I'm not the type to hold grudges, I'm a rather open-minded person. But I'm a man. I can't take it when others call me a calamity." She hadn't even been called that when she was by Yi Qianqian's side, but when she was by Chu Lingfeng's side, she was called a calamity. Even if the uncle could endure it, even if the aunt could endure it, this big sister couldn't. Luo Qingtong snorted coldly at Chu Yuqing. "Young Master Yuqing, do you want me to have the young master personally demand justice from you, or do you want to do it yourself?" As soon as Luo Qingtong spoke, Chu Yuqing's expression froze. "You dare!" he shouted, trying to put on a brave front. She wanted Chu Lingfeng to demand justice. She clearly wanted his life. Chu Yuqing suddenly realized that Luo Qingtong didn't have to deal with Chu Qiankong and the others. She didn't have to deal with Chu Hanyu and the others. Chapter 2642. Damn it, this slut. She must have deliberately prevented Chu Lingfeng from making a move just now. In this way, his side strength was divided. As long as she showed that she only wanted to deal with him, the others wouldn't care at all. Sure enough, when he looked at Chu Hanyu and the others, he saw that their faces were full of indifference. Chu Hanyu and the others were vexed. If they had known that they wouldn't be able to hurt Chu Lingfeng this time, they wouldn't have joined forces with Chu Yuqing and the others. Now they were riding a tiger and couldn't get off. At this moment, seeing that Luo Qingtong was only going to deal with Chu Yuqing, why would they bother with him? They wished that Luo Qingtong would only deal with Chu Yuqing so that this matter could be wiped clean. After all, they hadn't officially made a move against Chu Lingfeng. When they returned to their families in the future, it would be easier to explain. But Chu Lingfeng's side would definitely have a grudge against them. With this thought in mind, how could they have the time to care about Chu Yuqing? When the latter saw this scene, he suddenly felt a burst of fear and trepidation. Luo Shaoqi, this slut, really wanted to use this opportunity to kill him. Just like how he had wanted to use her name to kill Chu Lingfeng. When Chu Yuqing thought of this, the muscles on his face suddenly twitched fiercely. Seeing that Luo Qingtong was about to call Chu Lingfeng to make a move, he immediately shouted, "Wait." Speaking up to this point, he said with great humiliation, "I apologize." Chu Yuqing almost bit his cheeks as he said this sentence. To have him bow his head to a mercenary, and a man that Chu Lingfeng had taken a fancy to, was extremely humiliating for Chu Yuqing. "Slut, sooner or later I'll make you die without a burial place." Chu Yuqing thought viciously in his heart, but on the surface, he gritted his teeth and said word by word, "I apologize." "Oh, then how does young Master Yuqing intend to apologize?" Luo Qingtong calmly looked at Chu Yuqing as she spoke. She knew what he was thinking when she saw his tough exterior but cowardly heart. However, Luo Qingtong was happy to let him misunderstand, which saved her a lot of tricks. As she spoke, Chu Yuqing's eyes widened. What do you mean by apologize? He barked harshly. He had already apologized to her. This be *tch, what else did he want? Chu Yuqing's face was filled with rage. Luo Qingtong looked at him leisurely and said, Young Master Yuqing, this is strange. You want to kill me because I'm a troublemaker. You don't think that this matter will be settled with just a few words of apology, right? If that's the case, that's fine too. I'll get young Lord Chu to teach you a lesson. I'll apologize to you after this. How about it? Luo Qingtong's lips curled into a faint smile. Chu Yuqing, on the other hand, was already on the verge of roaring out, not much. The veins on his forehead twitched fiercely. How could he not know that Luo Qingtong's words were a threat? If he really let that idiot Chu Lingfeng take action, then the other party can only wait to apologize to a corpse. This slut. Chu Yuqing's heart was filled with hatred. But no matter how much he hated her, there was nothing he could do. In this situation, no one in the Chu family was on his side, and Luo Qingtong had a good reason to deal with him. He simply couldn't refuse. At this time, Chu Yuqing finally understood how Luo Qingtong felt when she was threatened with the label of a troublemaker. Luo Shaoqi, this slut, she did it on purpose. Chapter 2643. I'll slap myself 10 times as an apology. Chu Yuqing clenched his teeth so hard they were about to bleed. But just as he spoke, Luo Qingtong's voice rang out. Not enough. Luo Shaoqi. Chu Yuqing roared. Don't go too far. With your cheap life, if it weren't for that idiot Chu Lingfeng, who do you think you are? It's already good enough that I'm willing to apologize to you. You actually dare to be so picky. When she heard Chu Yuqing's words, a bloody light flashed across Luo Qingtong's eyes, carrying a cold and bloodthirsty aura. Suppressing the blood in her eyes, Luo Qingtong looked at the roaring and furious Chu Yuqing in front of her. Her lips curled into a devilishly charming smile. The birthmark on her face was sinister and ugly, but as her smile blossomed, a kind of seductive charm that even dirt couldn't conceal seeped out. But very quickly, this feeling disappeared without a trace, as if it was just a hallucination. Young Master Yuqing, you're right. Luo Qingtong smiled as she looked at Chu Yuqing. She raised a hand to stop Chu Lingfeng, whose eyes were red with anger and was about to rush out. She nodded at Chu Yuqing and said, I'm nothing, but you, young Master Yuqing, are something. But no matter how much you're something. Shouldn't you apologize to me now? Luo Qingtong spoke slowly. Since Chu Yuqing didn't want face, then she wouldn't give him any. I'll say it right here today. Young Master Yuqing, you can either apologize until I'm satisfied. Otherwise, I'll have young Master Chu teach you what it means to apologize. You should know that I'm looking forward to it. After all, my cheap life is nothing, don't you think? But young Master Yuqing, your life is precious. No matter how you look at it, I don't lose out. Moreover, with young Master Chu around, I might not be in danger. At this point, Luo Qingtong smiled at Chu Yuqing, her lips parting slightly. Chu Yuqing could clearly see that it was the word thank you. This be *tch, she's deliberately provoking me. That's right, she didn't want him to apologize at all. She just wanted to provoke him so that Chu Lingfeng would attack him. Damn it, how could he forget about this? As Chu Yuqing thought this, his heart trembled. He was so angry just now that he had forgotten about this. This bastard Luo Shaoqi is really cunning. Chu Yuqing gritted his teeth. He had almost fallen for Luo Qingtong's trap. Was this be *tch waiting for him to not apologize in anger? He would not let her have her way. 20. He shouted sternly, 20 slaps. 100. Luo Qingtong's expression was indifferent. She looked at Chu Lingfeng coldly and said, I also want to clarify that you have wronged me. You. Chu Yuqing was furious, but when he thought about how Luo Qingtong was deliberately provoking him, he immediately suppressed his anger. He would endure it for now. In the future, he would definitely make her die without a burial place. Chu Yuqing roared in his heart, but on the surface, he swallowed his anger and said, 50. I can't go any higher. 200. Luo Qingtong's voice was cold. She held her head high and looked at Chu Yuqing, acting like a petty person who had achieved her goal. Her arrogant appearance was so vivid that it could drive a person to death. Young Master Yuqing, if you continue to blabber, I reckon that you won't be able to stop even if the heart of the continent opens. Are you sure you're sincere? Chapter 26:44. Luo Qingtong's words were full of arrogance. She used Chu Lingfeng to threaten Chu Yuqing at every turn, looking as if she couldn't wait to kill him. Chu Yuqing was so angry that he trembled and saw stars. He was now completely certain that Luo Qingtong wanted him dead, so she didn't want him to apologize. She was deliberately making things difficult for him. As he thought about it, he gritted his teeth and agreed to Luo Qingtong's request. All right, 200 then. This slut has nothing to say now, right? Oh, I forgot to tell young Master Yuqing. 200 was the price just now. Now it's 300. Who told young Master Yuqing to answer so slowly? Don't you think so? Luo Qingtong smiled sweetly at Chu Yuqing, almost causing him to vomit blood in anger. The more difficult Luo Qingtong was to make things difficult for him, the more certain Chu Yuqing was that Luo Qingtong wanted him dead. He held his breath and didn't even reply to Luo Qingtong. He only said fiercely, all right. 300 then. Then young Master Yuqing, you may begin. Luo Qingtong smiled. Remember, don't use too little strength. Otherwise, I don't mind having young Master Chu do it for me. As soon as Luo Qingtong said those words, Chu Yuqing's eyes twitched fiercely. Originally, he had already dispersed the power in his palm and was prepared to use his own hand to gently slap Yizichin. But as soon as Luo Qingtong said those words, he could only gather all his strength in his palm and ruthlessly slap himself. Paw! Chu Yuqing was almost sent flying by his own slap, and he spat out a mouthful of blood. Seeing this scene, the surrounding people were all dumbstruck. Oh my God, Chu Yuqing really did apologize to me. Not only that, he even slapped himself so fiercely. What's going on? Just because Luo Qingtong said she wanted Chu Lingfeng to teach him a lesson? If he was afraid of Chu Lingfeng, he wouldn't have plotted to kill him. No matter how hard they tried, they couldn't figure out the crux of the matter. They had originally thought that Chu Yuqing would resolutely refuse to apologize. After all, these top-notch disciples placed great importance on face, and Chu Yuqing hated Luo Qingtong and Chu Lingfeng to the bone. He'd rather be taught a lesson by Chu Lingfeng than admit his own mistakes. But what was going on now? Everyone was dumbfounded. Only a small number of people noticed some clues. Master, the evil doctor is really... Feng Yu's lips twitched. She thought to herself that she and the others should stay away from the evil doctor in the future. This scheme of his was really too frightening. If they offended the demonic doctor would play them to death even without their master's help. Chu Jingyi also looked at Luo Qingtong in shock. Oh my God, she couldn't have already planned to make Chu Yuqing so miserable when she stopped the young master, right? Really, Chu Jingyi clutched his cheek, feeling a burst of pain. It was said that killing someone shouldn't be too excessive. If he were Chu Yuqing, he'd rather be killed than be toyed with like this, right? Chu Yuqing had been completely led into a ditch by Luo Shaoqi. Chu Jingyi believed that if Luo Qingtong had told Chu Yuqing to slap himself 300 times as an apology, and also to state that he had wronged her, Chu Yuqing would never have agreed. But she had gradually led Chu Yuqing into the trap bit by bit. Chu Yuqing hadn't been able to react in time and had fallen into her trap. When Chu Yuqing came back to his senses, he'd probably hate her to the bone. That's not right. He already hates her to the bone. Chapter 2645. While the Tianfeng Chu clan was still in shock, Lian Xingchen was also looking at Luo Qingtong in astonishment. He could clearly see that from beginning to end, the rhythm of the entire scene was in the hands of this seemingly thin and frail youth. The other party's methods were truly impressive. If the young master of the Tianfeng Chu clan was half as scheming as her, or rather, if she was willing to help the young master of the Tianfeng Chu clan, the position of the young master of the Tianfeng Chu clan wouldn't belong to anyone else. Thinking about it this way, the young master of the Tianfeng Chu clan had profited from a disaster. She had encountered an ambush, but had met such a monstrous youth. It was a pity that the Tianfeng Chu clan had met her first. Otherwise, he might have tried to recruit her to the Lian clan. After all, with her scheming and methods, who knew how stunning she would be when her strength grew in the future? Lian Xingchen couldn't help but feel a little regretful. Somewhere not far away, Zhang Beiyue and the others narrowed their eyes as they looked in the direction of the Tianfeng Chu clan and the Feixing Lian clan. Young master, this youth called Luo Shaoqi is truly impressive. A member of the Zhang clan standing beside him said. They were far away, so they didn't know what was going on over there. But looking at the series of actions of the Tianfeng Chu clan and the Feixing Lian clan, as well as Chu Yuqing slapping himself in the mouth, they could still make some guesses. The Zhang clan originally had a deep impression of Luo Qingtong. Previously, when Chu Yuqing had tried to kill Chu Lingfeng, they had seen how easily Luo Qingtong had rescued Chu Lingfeng. Now that they saw her reverse the situation, they were even more surprised. This young man was far more powerful than they had imagined. It's a pity that we have matters to attend to. The middle-aged man sighed again. Luo Qingtong, this kind of intelligent and resourceful youth, was really a good target to recruit, but it was a pity that this was not the right occasion. Zhang Beiyue's face was indifferent and he didn't say anything. Looking at Luo Qingtong's eyes, there was a faint trace of appreciation. The youth's calmness and intelligence in the face of the murderous intent was indeed very rare. Even though he was in a disadvantageous position, he did not panic in the face of danger. His strength was low, but he was neither servile nor overbearing. On the contrary, he had the strength to counterattack. His every word and action seemed very arrogant and despotic, but in fact, he had always stepped on the other party's bottom line. If Zhang Beiyue was in her position, he probably wouldn't be able to do better than her. It was a pity that they had to conceal their identities in order to obtain the ancient divine item. They would try to recruit this young man when they met him in the future. Keep an eye on the heart of the continent for now. Also, don't alert the people of the Lian family and the Chu family. Pay attention to the people from the demonic moon sect. See if they will make any moves. As soon as Zhang Beiyue's words left his mouth, the faces of the Zhang clan members turned solemn. They hurriedly replied, yes. The whereabouts of the ancient divine item were right in front of them. They had to be extremely careful. The people from the demonic moon sect had eavesdropped on their conversation and already knew about the existence of the ancient divine item. This time, even if they were seriously injured, they wouldn't give up on obtaining information about the ancient divine item. If the other party really saw an opening and obtained the ancient divine item, it would be troublesome. Everyone's faces were grave. In the direction of Luo Qingtong and the others. Slap. 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 Chapter 2646. Boom! A terrifying wave of spiritual energy came from right in front of Luo Qingtong and the rest. It was the hole in the ground where the heart of the continent was located. The last bit of power of the great Tao around the heart of the continent had completely erupted. The spiritual energy in the surroundings was as pure as water, and it was full of vitality. It dissipated in an instant. Countless streams of decaying spiritual energy surged in from all directions and rapidly eroded this fertile land. The amount of power of the great Tao that erupted from the heart of the continent was too little for the entire abandoned continent. It couldn't be compared to the decaying spiritual energy in the abandoned continent at all. Now that the last bit of spiritual energy in the heart of the continent had erupted, without the support of the spiritual energy, the decaying spiritual energy immediately began to invade again. The location of the hole in the heart of the continent was completely clear in front of Luo Qingtong and the rest. Without the continuous eruption of power of the great Tao, they could enter this place. Let's go! Lian Xingqian and the rest's eyes lit up when they saw this scene. With a swoosh, they dashed toward the huge hole in the ground. When Luo Qingtong and the rest saw this, they couldn't be bothered with Chu Yuqing, who was slapping himself in the face. With a swoosh, they also dashed toward the huge hole. Boom! Yi Qianxian appeared in front of Luo Qingtong in an instant. Without waiting for Chu Lingfeng to react, he pulled Luo Qingtong into his arms and dashed toward the hole. Bastard! Chu Lingfeng was enraged. He had always harbored great enmity toward Yi Qianxian. This man obviously had ill intentions toward his master. His master belonged to Ming Zun. He chased after Yi Qianxian and the rest. However, with the strength of Yi Qianxian and the others, how could they easily catch up to them? The group maintained a certain distance from Lian Xingqian's group and entered the cave almost at the same time as Lian Xingqian. Only now did everyone realize that the strength of this group of white jade masked men was not inferior to the bodyguards of the top disciples of the Tianfeng Chu clan. Since when did Heaven's Wind Mercenary City have such a person? Everyone looked at Yi Qianxian and the others in surprise. The latter and the others looked calm and composed. With the white jade masks covering their faces, no one could see their expressions. They only felt that the origins of this group of people were not simple. He was most likely not a member of the Tianfeng Mercenary City. Instead, he was hiding among the mercenaries and had coincidentally encountered the Tianfeng Chu clan issuing a mission, so he came to join in the fun. Fortunately, Yi Qianxian's team was not the only one. Some of the mercenaries from the Flying Star Lian clan and the Tianfeng Chu clan also quietly displayed strength that was different from the rest. When Luo Qingtong and the others were being attacked by Chu Yuqing and the others, there were still some mercenaries who did not side with her. Instead, they chose to watch from where they were. At this moment, within this group of people, there were people whose strength was on par with the guards of the Chu clan of Heavenly Wind. The Flying Star Lian clan situation was similar. A group of mercenaries who had kept a low profile suddenly stood out from the crowd. Chapter 2647. Even though they knew that the Tianfeng Chu family and the Lian family of Flying Star would never let anyone take away the Tianluo grass, they were still willing to take the risk and try. What if they succeeded? Even if they couldn't, they could still try. If they couldn't, they wouldn't lose anything, right? Luo Qingtong looked in shock at Yi Qianmin, who snatched her into his arms. Brother. Call me husband. Yi Qianxian's face was indifferent, and his eyes hidden behind the white jade mask were deep. Didn't you say you were praising me? You didn't call me that before. Nonsense. Why did you call me that? The word husband wasn't really a compliment. Luo Qingtong's face was full of pain, and she could not say anything for a long time. She was afraid that she would mislead Yi Qianren and let him call every person he liked hubby. She would definitely go crazy at that time. Therefore, she deliberately avoided calling Yi Qianxian husband in front of him. What's more, she was still a teenager. She still had some doubts about calling Yi Qianxian husband. After all, even if she knew that Luo Qingtong was Luo Xiaoqi, she still didn't want to call Yi Qianxian husband as Luo Xiaoqi. She always felt that if she called Yi Qianxian that way when he didn't know anything, he would be taken advantage of. In a way, Luo Qingtong and Yi Qianxian were just as possessive. Even if it was her alias, she didn't have the right to take away her man. Luo Qingtong was so unreasonable. Therefore, she coughed softly and immediately changed the topic. Well, young Master Chu, before she finished her words, Yi Qianxian's cold voice sounded. Don't worry about him. He is too troublesome to protect you. You'd better stay by my side obediently. Since I've accepted the protection fees, I'll naturally do my best. When he said that, Luo Qingtong's lips twitched. So this is the reason why you snatched me away so openly. What a pain in the ass. Thinking about how Chu Lingfeng did not know Yi Qianren's identity at all and was still on guard against her, fearing that she would fall in love with someone else, Luo Qingtong felt her balls ache. Fortunately, Chu Lingfeng might not have the time to find trouble with Yi Qianxian later. Being by Yi Qianxian's side was indeed safer than being by Chu Lingfeng's side. Most importantly, if she didn't reveal her abilities, it would be easy for people to see her as Chu Lingfeng's weakness if she was by his side. If she was targeted, it would be disadvantageous to Chu Lingfeng. With this thought in mind, Luo Qingtong didn't refute it. In fact, if it weren't for that blockhead Chu Lingfeng's misunderstanding, she would have been by Yi Qianxian's side right now. Therefore, she didn't say anything else. The group of people flew and rushed into the hole at an extremely fast speed. It was filled with rich vitality and spiritual energy, which was completely different from the corrosive spiritual energy outside. For the time being, the corrosive spiritual energy wouldn't be able to corrode this place. The rich spiritual energy meant that the people here could use the energy in their bodies to attack without restraint. They didn't have to worry that they wouldn't be able to replenish their energy in time after using it up. Boom! The moment they entered the cave, an attack erupted from the team. The Flying Star Lien family took the lead in attacking Luo Qingtong and the others. Chapter 2648. The Flying Star Lien family was also competitive, but unlike the Tianfeng Chu family, Lien Xingqian's position in the Flying Star Lien family had been consolidated. The top disciples of the Flying Star Lien family were convinced of his ability and strength and were willing to work for him. As long as the Flying Star Lien family got their hands on the Tianluo grass, it didn't matter who got it. However, the Tianfeng Chu family couldn't. They couldn't let the Tianfeng Chu family get their hands on the Tianluo grass. Therefore, the people of the Lien family of the Flying Star launched attacks on Luo Qingtong and the others after they entered the hole. Boom! The Tianfeng Chu family members were shocked and enraged by the attacks. B*****. Chu Qiankong and the others were almost at the same level as Yi Qianxian. They had to dodge when they saw the attacks coming at them. Yi Qianxian's eyes flickered as he raised his hand and blocked the attacks. However, he, Beiqing Fengyu, and the others did not show their true strength. When they blocked the attacks, they pretended to be shocked and took 2 steps back. Boom! With the help of the strike, the members of the Lien family of the Flying Star sector had already rushed into the depths of the cave ahead of them. Chu Qiankong and the others were furious when they saw this. Luo Qingtong raised her eyebrows and looked at Yi Qianxian. With the strength of this man and Beiqing Fengyu, how could they be pushed back by the Lien family of the Flying Star realm? What a joke! Luo Qingtong had seen Yi Qianxian shatter the attacks with ease. It was as if he had crushed a few pieces of tofu. Luo Qingtong had been worried that his blocking would worsen the damage to his meridians. When she saw this, the corners of her mouth twitched and she put away her worries. If he could hurt Yi Qianxian by chopping a few pieces of tofu, he wouldn't be able to do anything. Just how strong was this man after he unleashed his full power? Luo Qingtong was inexplicably in a trance. When she was at the True Spill continent, she had never seen Yi Qianxian use his full strength. At that time, she knew that Yi Qianxian's strength was far from the upper limit of True Spill continent strength. The only time this man was weak was probably before she met him, when his meridians were weak and torn. However, after being healed by the energy in her body, the strength of his meridians increased. From then on, she could no longer feel the upper limit of his strength. Now that he was in the outer realms, it was still the same. This man was really too strong. Indeed, all the hot-blooded genes in her that refused to admit defeat had been aroused. With that thought in mind, Luo Qingtong's lips curled into a domineering and devilish smile. Her head was lowered, so Yi Qianxian couldn't see the curve of her lips, but he could feel her puzzled gaze. He knew that she was wondering why he didn't continue to attack even though he could clearly block the attack. There's no need. Yi Qianxian's expression was indifferent. Luo Qingtong soon understood the meaning of Yi Qianxian's words. When Yi Qianxian's voice sounded, sharp screams and roars suddenly erupted from the depths of the hole in front of them. Then, there was the sound of flesh being torn apart. In this sealed underground hole, it was exceptionally loud and mournful. It's the people from the Flying Star Lian family who entered before. Luo Qingtong's eyes flashed and she looked into the depths of the hole in front of her. Chu Qiankong and the others, who were originally furious and wanted to chase after them, were also stunned. Chapter 2649. A group of people suddenly appeared in the depths of the cave. They were the people from the Flying Star Lian family who'd charged in earlier. Fall back. Lian Xingqian and the others were covered in blood. The top disciples of the Flying Star Lian family were at the back of the group, swords in hand. Beside them were the guards of the top disciples. At this moment, their numbers seemed to have decreased by a lot. Nearly a third of their people had disappeared. Not only that, but the mercenaries around the ordinary disciples of the Flying Star Lian family had also decreased in number. They were either injured or crippled. Under the protection of Lian Xingqian and the others, they were charging toward the entrance of the cave where Luo Qingtong and the others were. Behind Lian Xingqian and the others, roar. Violent roars rang out one after another. The next second, there was a loud boom. Transparent figures, which seemed to have become one with the dense spiritual energy around them, leaped around the cave and chased after the Flying Star Lian family. Bang! A transparent figure jumped onto a rock wall. Then, with a boom, its four limbs and claws sank deep into the rock wall. The solid rock walls and boulders in the underground cave were all smashed into smithereens. It had to be known that the rock walls of the underground cave where the heart of the continent was located could even withstand the scouring of the aura of the great Tao that had erupted. Its hardness was far beyond that of ordinary rock formations. However, at this moment, under the scratches of these transparent figures, they were shattered into fragments of sand and stone. At this moment, Luo Qingtong and the others finally got a good look at the transparent figures. These transparent silhouettes were actually monsters of unknown origin. They were all grotesque in appearance. Some were covered in scales and had feathers on their heads. Some were crawling on the ground with limbs as thick as pillars. They looked like beast legs, but were actually bird claws. These transparent figures were all grotesque in appearance. When they let out sharp roars, the invisible spiritual energy around them surged violently. The Great Tao has turned into a spirit. These are all creatures formed by the Great Tao's power. When the Heavenly Wind Chu clan members saw this, they all sucked in a breath of cold air. The Great Tao transforming into a spirit, what kind of concept was that? Legend has it that the 3,000 great Daos all have their own spirits. Primordial chaos split open the heavens, evolving all things, and then evolving the laws. When the primordial chaos opened the heavens, it gave birth to the spirit of the Grand Tao. These living beings were the embodiments of the great Tao laws. They were innate divine beings. They could freely manipulate any type of law and transform into a myriad of forms. Any cultivation method would be useless against them. Only an Almighty who had completely mastered a certain law of heaven and earth would be able to use the power of the great path that he had mastered to deal with them. However, the spiritualization of the great Tao only existed in legends. Moreover, there was a fixed number of great Tao spirits. Only under extremely harsh circumstances would a great Tao spirit be born. Why did so many great Tao spirits suddenly appear here? Could it be that the power of laws from the heart of the continent had already surpassed the power of laws of the world? Had it reached the level where it could recreate primordial chaos and split the world apart? This was utter nonsense. As everyone thought this, they quickly recovered from their shock and astonishment. It's not the great Tao spirit transformation. A disciple of the Tianfeng Chu clan said. Chapter 2650. If the power of the great path here has reached the level where it can transform into a spirit, we'll be crushed to death by the pressure of the spiritual qi before we even enter the hole. He said with certainty, it's impossible for there to be a single living thing on this abandoned continent. And it won't become an abandoned continent. One could imagine how rich the power of the great path here was to be able to evolve into a great path creature. Hongmang had opened the heavens. That was the power of creation. Wasn't it normal for it to bring a small abandoned continent back to life? Moreover, the strength of these great path spirits was a little too weak. When the people from the Tianfeng Chu clan heard him say this, they immediately raised their heads to look at the transformed great path spirits. They discovered that their auras were indeed only at the level of the human martial realm. Although they looked very powerful, due to the limitations of their strength, it was impossible for them to be so powerful that they could defy the natural order. And the strength of the great path spirits was definitely not this weak. So these aren't great path spirits? A disciple from the Tianfeng Chu clan asked hesitantly. But these transparent figures were clearly the characteristics of great path spirits. It was impossible for the crowd to be mistaken. I don't know either. The disciple from the Tianfeng Chu clan said with a frown. What I can be sure of is that these things are definitely not real great path spirits, but they do seem to be transformed by the power of the great path here. This was a little inconceivable. They weren't great path spirits, but they were transformed by the power of the great path. And the power of the great path here clearly hadn't reached the level where it could manifest into a spirit. Everyone was conflicted. At this moment, these pseudo-great Tao spirits instantly screamed and pounced at the crowd. Some of them pounced on Luo Qingtong and the others. Others pounced on the people from the Flying Star Lien clan. Seeing this scene, the faces of the people from the Tianfeng Chu clan froze. Quick! Don't think so much. Deal with them first. Although they didn't know what was going on with these fake great path spirits, the people from the Tianfeng Chu clan didn't have time to think too much when they saw them pounce on them. These fake great path spirits were clearly trying to drive them out of this hole. However, the heart of the continent only opened once a year. There was only one chance to enter at a time. Once they left this place, they could forget about entering it again. And if they waited another year, who knew what would happen to the Tianluo grass? What if it withered after reaching maturity? Wouldn't they miss this opportunity? With such thoughts in mind, how could they have the time to think about anything else? Immediately, they drew out their weapons and prepared to deal with the attacks of these fake great Tao spirits. At this time, Chu Lingfeng had already rushed in front of Yi Qianxian. He angrily wanted Yi Qianxian to return Luo Qingtong to him, but the youth silently glared at him. No. Luo Qingtong's lips parted slightly as she silently mouthed something to Chu Lingfeng. Given the urgency of the situation, it was best for her to stay by Yi Qianqian's side. For the time being, she did not intend to reveal her identity and abilities. Therefore, she did not want to be a burden to Chu Lingfeng. Moss, Chu Lingfeng fiercely stomped his feet, almost exposing Luo Qingtong's identity. He looked at Luo Qingtong with a pair of aggrieved and red eyes, looking like a big fierce dog that was afraid of angering its master. Luo Qingtong was both angry and amused when she saw his pitiful appearance. This silly big guy was really something. Chapter 26:51. Your clothes are a bit messy. As he spoke, he quietly grabbed Luo Qingtong's collar and lifted it up, as if he was helping her fix her clothes. Luo Qingtong froze for a moment. Oh. She responded in a low voice and nodded at Yi Qianxian. Thank you, brother. You're welcome. Yi Qianxian narrowed his eyes slightly. The corners of his lips curled up slightly. Then, he glanced at Chu Lingfeng. The latter's eyes were scarlet red, and he looked at him with a ferocious gaze like a ferocious beast. If not for the fact that Luo Qingtong was in his arms, Chu Lingfeng would have already pounced on him. The latter saw a red mark on Luo Qingtong's neck near her collarbone. He didn't know when that red mark was left there. The color was a little light, but he could vaguely see that it was a hickey. There was a hickey on Master's body. Thinking of how Luo Qingtong and Yi Qianxian were inseparable, and how tolerant Luo Qingtong was towards Yi Qianxian, even letting him hug her waist, Chu Lingfeng's eyes seemed to spit fire as he glared at Yi Qianxian. This man actually dared to plot against Master. Sob sob sob. Ming Zun, I couldn't protect Master. I'm sorry. Chu Lingfeng was anxious and angry, but Yi Qianqian's gaze was indifferent. The other party always wanted to snatch Luo Qingtong away from him. Previously, they hadn't entered the heart of the continent, so he could temporarily let go. But now, they had already entered the heart of the continent. The situation here was unknown, and something similar to the great Tao spirit had appeared. Yi Qianxian couldn't let Luo Qingtong leave his side. He didn't feel at ease leaving Luo Qingtong anywhere other than by his side. His woman should naturally be protected by him. However, in the end, Chu Lingfeng was protecting him and was loyal to Luo Qingtong. Yi Qianxian naturally wouldn't have a conflict with him. He used this method to make him back off. Presumably, when he saw this hickey, he would know that Luo Qingtong's attitude towards him was not ordinary. He would not think of taking this woman back by force. In fact, Chu Lingfeng felt as if he had been struck by lightning. He looked at Luo Qingtong with an unspeakable grievance in his eyes. His master still said that she didn't fall in love with someone else. There were even hickeys on her body. God knows that Luo Qingtong didn't even know about this. For the past few nights, she thought that she was sleepwalking and plotting against Yi Qianxian. How could she know that Yi Qianxian had already seen through her identity? This hickey was left behind at that time. Because he didn't want Luo Qingtong to know that he had seen through her identity, Yi Qianxian deliberately left this hickey on Luo Qingtong's body in a very hidden place. Unless Luo Qingtong took off her clothes and looked at herself in the mirror, it was impossible to find out. But in this abandoned continent, where would there be a mirror to look at? Even if there was, Luo Qingtong didn't have the leisure to look at it. Therefore, she never found out. At this time, Yi Qianxian deliberately left it out for Chu Lingfeng to see. She didn't know at all. When she saw Chu Lingfeng's expression change to one of grief, indignation, and grievance, she felt a wave of depression in her heart. What was going on? Why did this silly big guy's appearance become so strange? However, before Luo Qingtong could think about it, those pseudo-great Tao spirits had already rushed in front of them. Boom! Chapter 2652. The latter's shrill cry was so loud that it hurt everyone's eardrums. Not only that, but the transparent figures that were facing the attacks of the Tianfeng Chu family were instantly washed away like water and light. Then, with a bang, their auras scattered into the surrounding vitality and spirit qi, avoiding the attacks of the Tianfeng Chu family. Before anyone could react, their figures condensed again in midair, and then pounced on the people of the Tianfeng Chu family. Ah! A sharp scream sounded, and a guard of a top disciple was pounced on by a transparent figure. In an instant, his body was torn to pieces by the transparent figure in front of everyone's eyes. Rip! The guard's blood splattered and turned into minced meat that filled the sky. In contrast, the transparent monster was abnormally fierce. Roar! It roared in a low voice and pounced on the others again. The other people of the Tianfeng Chu family also encountered the same attack. Everyone's faces were filled with panic. They never thought that these fake Great Path spirits would have such an attack method. This is the characteristic of the Great Path spirits. The disciple of the Tianfeng Chu family from before shouted loudly. These things are indeed formed by the power of the Great Path in the heart of the continent. Although I don't know why they can manifest as spirits, they are indeed Great Path spirits. You must be careful. The Great Path spirits were born from the spirit qi. Naturally, they could transform into thousands of illusions at any time and anywhere and integrate into the spirit qi. Moreover, they could control their own laws and attack everyone. These transparent figures were indeed formed by the power of the Great Path in the heart of the continent. However, they were not as powerful as the real Great Path spirits. It must be because the power of the Great Path in the heart of the continent had not reached the level of being able to manifest as spirits, but it had given birth to Great Path spirits. Everyone was shocked, but they had no time to think too much at this time. Those Great Path spirits were coming menacingly. Because they did not expect their methods before, in an instant, many people died tragically like the previous guard. The people of the Tianfeng Chu family were in a mess. As for the Tao spirits, they either dissipated or reformed. They dissipated like mist inside the hole, but they were everywhere. Their strength was formidable, and their attacks were ferocious. Almost every time they attacked, they could take away the lives of a large number of Tianfeng Chu family members. Only now did the members of the Heavenly Wind Chu clan realize why the members of the Flying Star Lien clan looked so pitiful. It was obvious that the Lien family of the Flying Star sector was much more united and capable than theirs. The strength of these Great Path spirits wasn't particularly strong. Logically speaking, they were only in the human martial arts realm. Even though their claws could break gold and stones, they should not have been able to push the Lien family of the Flying Star to such a level. In just a few breaths, he was driven out from the depths of the hole in front. It turned out that the attacks of these Great Path spirits were too strange. It was almost impossible to hurt or touch. These Great Path spirits could only attack when they were in their true forms. And when they transformed into spirit qi, there was no trace of them at all. However, it just so happened that they transformed into spiritual energy, gathering and dispersing extremely quickly. Chapter 2653. If the Flying Star Lien family hadn't attracted some of the Great Path spirits for them, they would have been in the same predicament as the Flying Star Lien family. However, the Flying Star Lien family had suffered so much that they couldn't hold on any longer. Once they couldn't hold on any longer, the Tianfeng Chu family would be the next unlucky ones. Not only did the Tianfeng Chu family know about this, but the Flying Star Lien family also knew about it. They were lucky to have the upper hand before, but who would have thought that there was such a thing in the depths of the cave? They had been attacked by the Great Path spirits, and the advantage they had against the Tianfeng Chu family was gone. At this moment, only by cooperating with the Tianfeng Chu family could they get through this crisis and continue to advance into the depths of the cave. Thinking about this, Lian Xingchen forced a great path spirit in front of him away with his sword and scattered the spirit qi that it had transformed into. Then, he looked at Luo Qingtong and said, "Let's cooperate." His voice was sonorous and powerful. He didn't look at Chu Qiankong and the others, nor did he look at Chu Lingfeng. Instead, he looked at Luo Qingtong. This was because he could see that in the Tianfeng Chu family's team, only Luo Qingtong could make the decision and make the Tianfeng Chu family obey her without any objections. This young man controlled most of the mercenary teams, and Chu Lingfeng, as the young master of the Chu family, was willing to listen to her. Plus, the 8th elder's people. As long as Luo Qingtong agreed to cooperate with him, Chu Qiankong and the others would have to agree even if they didn't want to. Therefore, Lian Xingchen didn't ask anyone but Luo Qingtong. Who would have thought that the person in charge of the Tianfeng Chu family's team was a young mercenary who hadn't even reached the venerable realm? Okay. Luo Qingtong narrowed her eyes slightly. She was naturally able to see the situation in this battle. The people of the Flying Star Lian family could not be defeated. Otherwise, the people on their side would have to face the full attack of the Tao spirit. Luo Qingtong and the others had just entered the hole. They hadn't even seen the heart of the continent and the Tianluo grass yet. How could the Lian family and the Tianfeng Chu family suffer such heavy casualties? He didn't know what else was in the depths of this hole. As Luo Qingtong thought of this, she agreed without hesitation. Hearing her words, a trace of anger flashed across the faces of Chu Qiankong, Chu Yuanhong, and the others. The Tianfeng Chu family actually needed an outsider to make decisions for them. It was simply hateful. They had lost all face, and Chu Yuqing and the others were even more furious. The latter was almost beaten half to death by him just now. It wasn't until the heart of the continent's last burst of energy that he came back to his senses. He realized that he had fallen into Luo Qingtong's trap. He was a top disciple of the Tianfeng Chu family, yet he had slapped himself in the face and apologized to Luo Qingtong after she threatened him. Not only that, he had even beaten himself to the point of vomiting blood several times. As the saying goes, a scholar can be killed, but not humiliated. What had he been thinking? Why had he agreed to Luo Qingtong's conditions? And why had he beaten himself up to avenge Luo Qingtong? Chu Yuqing's eyes rolled back, and he almost fainted on the spot. If he hadn't known that the heart of the continent was completely open and that the Tianluo grass was at hand, he wouldn't have recovered so quickly. Chapter 2654. Luo Shaoqi, what right do you have to make a decision on behalf of the Tianfeng Chu clan? He shouted angrily. You don't have to agree. I'm sure the Lian clan will be happy to do so. Luo Qingtong snorted coldly. When did Chu Yuqing think this was going to happen? He didn't have to agree, but he would have to lead his people to survive on their own. Luo Qingtong was very happy. Presumably, the Lian clan was thinking the same thing. After all, if the Tianfeng Chu clan's forces were scattered, it would be a good thing for the Lian clan, who had suffered heavy losses. However, Luo Qingtong wasn't ready to divide the Tianfeng Chu clan's forces for the time being. At this time, more people meant more help. She and Yi Qianming would be able to save a lot of effort. Otherwise, why would she pay attention to Chu Yuqing? She would have kicked him out long ago. Hearing this, Chu Yuqing's face instantly froze. He was just making a fuss. Chu Yuqing wasn't stupid. Lian Xingchen had asked Luo Qingtong, which meant that their opinions weren't important. Hateful Chu Lingfeng, that idiot, listen to that bitch. Otherwise, how could they have ended up in this situation? Chu Yuqing gnashed his teeth inwardly. His face was green, red, and white, like a colorful color palette. However, he didn't dare to leave in a huff. Otherwise, if he left the group, he would be tortured to death by the spirits of the great Tao. It was also impractical to leave this place. Previously, they had refused to leave in every possible way. Now that the cave was surrounded by spirits of the great Tao, even the way out was blocked. They couldn't leave even if they wanted to. Thinking of this, Chu Yuqing's expression became more and more colorful. Under everyone's gazes, his face turned the color of a pig's liver. Luo Qingtong was too lazy to pay attention to him. Seeing that he was so sullen that he didn't dare to speak, she snorted coldly and said to everyone, "Let's go. We're going to the Lian clan." As soon as she spoke, Yi Qianming brought her forward. Bei Qing, Feng Yu, and the others followed closely behind, followed by Chu Lingfeng, Chu Xiaofeng, and Gui Feng. As soon as the group of people moved, the others could only follow suit. Although Chu Qiankong and the others were not worried, they knew that joining hands with the Lian family of the Flying Star sector was the best choice right now. Without the lips, the teeth would feel cold. Unless they didn't want the Tianluo grass anymore. Otherwise, they would have to cooperate with the Lian family of the Flying Star sector. They were supposed to agree to this, but Lian Xingchen only asked Luo Qingtong and not them. Did he think that they were inferior to Luo Qingtong? Chu Qiankong and the others felt extremely stifled after being suppressed by a young mercenary who wasn't even a venerate. They weren't much better off than Chu Yuqing. It was just that he didn't fly into a rage like Chu Yuqing. Lian Xingchen and the others were finally able to catch their breath when they met up with the Flying Star Lian family. They had just withstood the endless attacks of the spirits of the Great Tao and were about to collapse. The spirits of the Great Tao also seemed to be very intelligent. When they saw that Luo Qingtong and the others had joined hands with the Lian family of the Flying Star sector, their attacks became even fiercer. If this continued, Luo Qingtong and the others wouldn't be able to hurt the spirits of the Great Tao, while the latter would be able to continuously injure them. Sooner or later, they would be exhausted and die here. Is there any way? Yi Qianming's expression was indifferent. Chapter 2655. If someone could perceive the existence of these great Tao spirits, they would find that the great Tao spirit dissipated by Yi Qianming seemed to be hidden in the spiritual qi and dissipated into nothingness. But in fact, it was completely killed by Yi Qianming. The man's attack directly injured the source. Even if these great Tao spirits escaped into the spiritual qi after dissipating, they couldn't escape death. It was completely different from others who simply dissipated those great Tao spirits. He didn't mean anything else by asking Luo Qingtong. He just thought that this woman had many means and extraordinary abilities. Even if her identity was hidden, she might be able to think of a way to deal with these great Tao spirits. Of course, it didn't matter if she couldn't think of a way. At worst, he would just have to put in more effort. Yi Qianxian thought so and suddenly raised his hand to shatter another great Tao spirit. Bei Qing, Feng Yu, and the others were not as efficient as him. However, when the group worked together, they quickly killed the great path spirits around them one by one. If someone noticed them during the battle, they would find that the number of great Tao spirits on their side was the least. And there were fewer and fewer of them. And because these great Tao spirits were constantly dissipating and manifesting, they were killed by Bei Qing, Feng Yu, and the others without leaving any traces. No one noticed that something was wrong here. Luo Qingtong heard Yi Qianming's words and nodded subconsciously. Yes, but I don't know if it's effective. Luo Qingtong said and frowned. These great Tao spirits were originally formed by the power of the great Tao in the depths of this hole. In this case, even if Luo Qingtong had a pair of blood eyes, it was impossible to see their hidden traces. Because they themselves were the spiritual qi. Of course, Luo Qingtong could lock onto them when they first appeared. But even if Luo Qingtong pointed out the place where these great Tao spirits appeared, by the time everyone's attack hit, these great Tao spirits might have already dissipated. Unless those people could directly lock onto the place where they would appear with their blood eyes like Luo Qingtong and kill them directly. But that was impossible. And Luo Qingtong couldn't reveal her ability just like that. She narrowed her eyes. After carefully observing these Tao spirits, a vague idea flashed through her mind. However, this idea wasn't mature yet, so she wasn't prepared to say it out loud. She wanted to observe it more carefully. Who would have thought that Yi Qianxian would ask such a question? Yes. Yi Qianxian narrowed his eyes. He nodded and looked at Luo Qingtong. He whispered, "What is it? Tell me." Yes. Thinking of her current identity as Luo Qingtong, who was famous for her meticulous observation, Luo Qingtong was not afraid that Yi Qianxian would find anything wrong with her. She voiced out her thoughts. I'm thinking that since the spirits of the Great Path in the depths of these holes are formed from the power of the Great Path, then would they be afraid of the decaying spirit energy outside? Hearing Luo Qingtong's words, Yi Qianxian's eyes lit up in an instant. He looked at Luo Qingtong. In his eyes, there was an indescribable meaning. This woman was still the same as before. She could see through the essence at a glance. She thought she hid it well. Chapter 2656. Even if Luo Qingtong didn't expose her identity to Yi Qianxian, she couldn't hide it anymore. However, Yi Qianxian didn't intend to expose Luo Qingtong's identity, so he didn't say anything even if he knew. He just looked at her meaningfully and nodded. You're right. Since these great Tao spirits are formed by the vitality energy, the decaying spiritual energy outside must be their enemy. These great Tao spirits were the power of the great Tao, so they would lead the decaying spiritual energy in and corrode the vitality energy. In this way, these great Tao spirits would have nowhere to hide. As Yi Qianren said this, she immediately ordered Bei Qing and Feng Yu, who were beside her, go and draw in the decaying spiritual energy from the outside. The vitality energy in the heart of the continent had just erupted, so the decaying spiritual energy outside wouldn't be able to invade so quickly. He had to send people to bring the decaying spiritual energy in. When Bei Qing and Feng Yu heard this, they didn't say anything and directly rushed to the entrance of the hole. There was a group of great Tao spirits guarding the entrance, but they were no match for Bei Qing and Feng Yu at all. They were directly killed. Then the group rushed out of the hole. The people from the Lian family and the Tianfeng Chu family didn't know what was going on. They only saw Bei Qing and Feng Yu rushing out of the hole and thought that they had given up on escaping. However, the other party was too strong. It was impossible for the people from the Flying Star Lian clan and the Heavenly Wind Chu clan to directly disperse the Tao spirits guarding the entrance like they did. Everyone was shocked. As for Chu Yuqing, he laughed in schadenfreude. Ha, Luo Xiaoqi, your bodyguards abandoned you and your employer and ran away. He looked in the direction of Luo Qingtong and Yi Qianxian, thinking that Bei Qing and Feng Yu were the bodyguards hired by Yi Qianxian. From the looks of it, the other party had abandoned the two of them and fled. Chu Yuqing was gloating inwardly, but Luo Qingtong didn't feel like paying him any attention. When Bei Qing and Feng Yu brought in the decaying spirit qi, he realized that he had made a mistake. At that time, this hole would be filled with decaying spiritual qi. Let's see how he can still smile. In fact, this was indeed the case. If the decaying spirit qi filled the hole, then everyone's attacks would be limited. After all, although the decaying spirit qi didn't harm them, it couldn't replenish their strength. Luo Qingtong knew that the white jade masked man was Yi Qianxian, so she told him her idea. If it had been someone else, she might not have said it. After all, this method was somewhat risky. If they brought in the decaying spirit qi, but it was useless against the great Tao spirits, then they would be in big trouble. With their attacks and power limited, their situation would be even worse than before. Of course, Luo Qingtong didn't care about the existence of the decaying spirit qi. She'd stockpiled countless spiritual flowers and spiritual herbs outside. It was more than enough for Yi Qianxian and the others to replenish their strength. It was the same for Chu Xiaofeng and the others. However, the same couldn't be said for the people from the Lian family and Chu Yuqing. Therefore, she couldn't be bothered to listen to Chu Yuqing's mockery. When Bei Qing and Feng Yu brought in the decaying spirit qi, they'd make him cry. Chapter 2657. He'd suffered a few losses in front of Luo Qingtong before. Now that he'd finally found a way to regain some face, how could he let it go so easily? But before his mocking laughter could be heard for long, his voice came to an abrupt halt, as if someone had caught it in his throat. You talk too much nonsense. Yi Qianqian's voice was cold. He stared coldly at Chu Yuqing, as if he were looking at a dead man. Chu Yuqing's hair stood on end. He didn't know why, but when Yi Qianren looked at him like this, his heart and even his soul suddenly felt like he was going to die. His heart was in a state of panic, but his expression remained fierce. He yelled, "Who do you think you are?" Before he could finish his sentence, there was a commotion outside the cave. Boom! A violent and powerful aura suddenly exploded from the outside. In the next second, streams of decaying spiritual energy suddenly surged in from outside the hole's entrance. The dark gray spirit qi followed behind Bei Qing, Feng Yu, and the others as it violently surged into the hole and rushed into it. Seeing this scene, Chu Yuqing's voice was stuck in his throat. He watched as Bei Qing, Feng Yu, and the others rushed in from outside the hole. His expression was completely distorted. Bastards, what have you done? You've actually brought in all that decaying spiritual energy. Do you know that this will kill us? Chu Yuqing's voice was extremely shrill. His voice was like a cold owl, piercing through the hole. It was so sharp that it sounded like a demon's voice piercing through one's ears. But he didn't realize it at all. He only looked at the scene outside the hole, flustered and exasperated. He didn't know how Bei Qing, Feng Yu, and the others had done it. They'd opened up a path through the spiritual energy outside, forcibly bringing in the decaying spiritual energy that had been blocked outside. Chu Yuqing was practically stamping with rage. When the decaying spirit qi rushed in, they would lose their advantage of not having to worry about exhausting their strength. At that time, wouldn't they all die at the hands of these great Tao spirits? Thinking of this, his expression became extremely ferocious. He almost rushed in front of Luo Qingtong and attacked her. However, before he could do anything, Chu Lingfeng and the others had already stood in front of Luo Qingtong. You are not allowed to touch her. Chu Lingfeng's voice was cold. He didn't care what Luo Qingtong had done. Anyway, in his opinion, whatever Luo Qingtong did was right. Even if the other party wanted his life, he would still do it. The only thing that made him depressed was that his master really shouldn't have abandoned Mingzun. The man in front of her was too hateful. He glared fiercely at Yi Qianxian, then said to Chu Yuqing, "If you dare to touch her, I'll throw you out." If his master hadn't forbidden him from attacking Chu Yuqing and the others, they wouldn't even know how they died. He actually wanted to attack Luo Qingtong. When Chu Yuqing heard Chu Lingfeng's words, he almost fainted. Chu Lingfeng, this idiot. Luo Shaoqi is about to kill all of us, but he still wants to protect her. Does he have a brain? That's right, he's an idiot. There's no such thing as a brain. Chapter 2658. As soon as he said that, before Chu Qiankong and the others could say anything, Lian Xingchen's voice sounded faintly. She's not trying to kill us. Look carefully. As he spoke, he raised his hand and pointed in the direction Bei Qing, Feng Yu, and the others were coming from. Under their lead, the dark gray decaying spiritual energy behind them surged violently into the hole. Wherever it passed, the spirits of the Great Path, who had gathered again to guard the entrance of the hole, kept retreating in fear, as if they were very afraid of the decaying spiritual energy. Bei Qing, Feng Yu, and the others rushed towards them without being stopped at all. On the contrary, the spirits of the Great Path kept retreating. Not only that, they saw one of Bei Qing, Feng Yu, and the others shatter a spirit of the Great Path, who was enveloped by the decaying spiritual energy in time, with a punch. Something surprising happened. The great Tao spirit's figure dissipated and turned into invisible spirit qi. However, because it was surrounded by decaying spiritual energy, its spiritual energy couldn't dissipate into the decaying spiritual energy and was forcibly devoured. The decaying spiritual energy was the nemesis of these spirits of the Great Path. When everyone saw this, how could they not understand why Bei Qing, Feng Yu, and the others had led the decaying spiritual energy into the hole? Luo Qingtong wasn't harming them. She was clearly saving them. After all, compared to the harm of not being able to replenish their strength from the decaying spiritual energy, it was more important to be able to kill these spirits of the Great Path that they were almost unable to deal with. Not only that, but they could also continue to move deeper into the hole and obtain the Tianluo grass. This was incomparable to anything else. So what if they couldn't replenish their strength? Didn't they still have those spiritual flowers and spiritual herbs that they picked from outside? With this thought in mind, how could they blame Luo Qingtong at all? Even Chu Qiankong and the others, who had been angry at the beginning and were ready to attack with Chu Yuqing and the others, no longer had any objections. As for Chu Yuqing, he looked as if he had just been viciously slapped in the face. The expression on his face changed from arrogance, to clamoring, to stamping with rage, and finally to an indescribable embarrassment. Everyone looked at the expression on his face and felt embarrassed for him. From the very beginning, Chu Yuqing had been making things difficult for Luo Qingtong the moment he saw her. Who knew how many times he'd been slapped in the face, but he still didn't get tired of it. He really was a true warrior. The crowd sighed in their hearts. As for Chu Ku, and the others, they were gnashing their teeth so hard that their teeth were about to fall off. Previously, they thought that Luo Qingtong wouldn't be able to escape punishment this time. What a big crime to bring in that decaying spiritual energy. If they joined forces, they would be able to kill Luo Qingtong. In the end, the situation was reversed. Not only was Luo Qingtong fine, but she was also regarded as the savior of the world. The decaying spirit qi actually had the effect of restraining and killing these great Tao spirits. With the help of the decaying spirit qi, the crowd was no longer helpless against these great Tao spirits. This undoubtedly allowed Luo Qingtong to establish great prestige in front of everyone. Chapter 2659. Moreover, he would owe her a huge favor. How could such a thing happen to Luo Qingtong? Chu Yufei's heart was filled with hatred. Chu Yuqing, this idiot, he might as well not have said that Luo Qingtong was the one who did it. Great, now that he had caused a ruckus, he had helped Luo Qingtong expand her prestige. This idiot. Chu Yufei's heart felt like it was being sliced by a knife. She had always boasted that her schemes weren't bad, but Luo Qingtong was better than her in every way. Not only had she ruined her plans several times, she had also stolen the limelight this time. Chu Yufei had always been the object of admiration and protection wherever she went. But first, she had run into a wall with Yi Qianxian, and then Luo Qingtong's radiance had suppressed her to the point that she couldn't even be compared to the background. This was a huge blow to her prideful and vain heart. Fortunately, this Luo Xiaoqi was a man. If it had been a woman, the jealousy and hatred in Chu Yufei's heart was like a poisonous fog, constantly churning in her mind. By the time everyone saw the effects of the dark gray decaying spiritual energy, Bei Qing, Feng Yu, and the others had led the dark gray fog to them. This group of people was deliberately delaying. Otherwise, with their strength, how could they have taken so long to rush back to Luo Qingtong's group after the Great Path spirits had been forced to retreat? They had only done this so that everyone could better see the benefits and effects of the dark gray decaying spiritual energy. They had clearly heard Chu Yuqing's mockery earlier. He actually dared to mock their mistress. Bei Qing, Feng Yu, and the others' eyes were cold as they looked in the direction of Chu Yuqing's group. After this matter was over, they would definitely let them know how the word death was written. Young master, it's done. They nodded to Luo Qingtong and Yi Qianxian. She was calling Yi Qianxian, who was also Luo Qingtong's current identity. After all, the girl had not fully recovered her identity yet. Even if Bei Qing, Feng Yu, and the others knew that the other party was their mistress, they would not expose Luo Qingtong and Yi Qianxian's identities at this time. Yes. Yi Qianxian's expression was indifferent as he responded in a low voice. He looked at the decaying spirit qi that had been attracted by Bei Qing and Feng Yu. At this moment, the decaying spirit qi was rolling and attacking the surrounding life spirit qi. Luo Qingtong and the others were surrounded by the decaying spiritual energy. The spirits of the Great Path that had surrounded them and attacked them were now shrieking and retreating into the depths of the hole. The people of the Tianfeng Chu clan and the Flying Star Lian clan finally had a chance to catch their breath. Come on, let's chase after them. Everyone was very excited. Looking at the spirits of the Great Path retreating into the depths of the hole, everyone's breathing became much heavier. If they killed these spirits of the Great Path, wouldn't the Tianluo grass nurtured in the heart of the continent in the depths of the hole belong to them? However, although everyone was very excited, some people still remembered the attack that the Flying Star Lian clan had encountered when they had rushed into the depths of the hole. Who knew what else was in the depths of the hole? If there was another ambush, it was likely that all of them would die here. Therefore, even if some people were clamoring to rush in and kill their way in, they would not be able to escape. Chapter 2660. What do you think, young Master Shao-Chi? Should we continue chasing after them? One of the Flying Star Lian family's top disciples asked, his expression extremely respectful. Even his tone was indescribably polite and gentle. It was clear that after this incident, the Flying Star Lian family had thoroughly acknowledged Luo Qingtong's abilities. They valued and trusted her greatly. Not only that, but when they'd asked the youth for help, he'd agreed without hesitation. Chu Yuqing had even made things difficult for him. If not for the youth's agreement, the Flying Star Lian family probably wouldn't have received any help from the Tianfeng Chu clan. Chu Yuqing and the others would definitely have reprimanded and humiliated them in every possible way. By then, not only would the dignity of the Lian family of the Flying Star sector be gone, even the capability of the team would suffer a blow that was even more severe than before. Therefore, the Flying Star Lian family members were extremely grateful to Luo Qingtong. As for Chu Yuqing and the others, they didn't even bother to look at them. In truth, Chu Yuqing had been wrongly accused. He was unhappy that the Flying Star Lian family wanted to ally with the Tianfeng Chu clan, not with them, but with Luo Qingtong. That was why he'd spoken out against Luo Qingtong, not because he wanted to refuse the Flying Star Lian family's alliance. But in that situation, when his words fell on the Flying Star Lian family's ears, they thought he was unwilling to agree to their request for help. Moreover, he didn't allow Luo Qingtong to agree to their request. That was why he'd gotten into a fight with Luo Qingtong. It could be said that this was all a beautiful misunderstanding. If Chu Yuqing knew that his indignant actions had ended up benefiting Luo Qingtong, increasing her standing in the hearts of the Flying Star Lian clan's people, while also harming himself, who knew if he would spit out a mouthful of blood? Luo Qingtong immediately nodded when she heard the Flying Star Lian family's question. We can chase after them. Her blood-red eyes flashed faintly. She didn't see the Tao spirits laying down any ambush in the depths. It was very clear that they were truly afraid of the decaying spiritual qi. They had already completely retreated, shrinking into an even deeper place. All right. The top disciple of the Flying Star Lian family was overjoyed. He then looked at Lian Xingchen beside him. Young master. The latter had just been severely injured while blocking the attacks of those great Tao spirits. Those Tao spirits had come so suddenly that Lian Xingchen had suffered several serious injuries in order to protect the Lian family disciples around him. At this moment, he had just finished bandaging and treating his wounds. When he heard this, he immediately nodded and said, "Listen to little seventh young master. Let's go." As he spoke, he looked deeply at Luo Qingtong. Just now, when they were outside the cave, Luo Qingtong had been forced by Chu Yuqing and the others to ask for his help and respectfully address him as young Lord Lian. Now, the other party was qualified for him to call him little seventh young master. The fate of life was truly peculiar. And this young man's ability was far more complicated than he had imagined. I wonder how much the seventh young master's bodyguards have consumed after going out to draw in the decaying spiritual energy. If you don't mind, the Flying Star Lian family is willing to protect little seventh young master. We can swear an oath to the heavens that we won't harm you in the slightest, nor will we secretly imprison you. When it's time to seize the Tianluo grass, we'll compete fairly with the Tianfeng Chu family. What do you think? You're tuning in to the LoveLore Library YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.